Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 25 of the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast. Gentlemen, we're a quarter of the way to 100. Look at us. We actually can do something consistently. It's kind of amazing.
I know. 25 more episodes and Bon Jovi's going to come out. What are we going to do?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Karaoke episode. I'm down for that.
Okay, alright.
You'd be okay with it? That'd be very Japanese.
Alright, live karaoke session for episode 25 of the podcast. I am your host, Alex, otherwise known as Lexi. I go by MaskedSwan on the internet, and I am joined by the terrific man himself. That is Alex, otherwise known as Nymaera Hapgood. And there's only one way to call this. The accommodator. The accommodating man himself, Samuel, otherwise known as Initia1ise Hapgood, the man that was with me through all of it from 4 AM on Saturday, all the way through.
My bad.
No, you
had to work.
As we mentioned on the cast, you had prior arrangements, and that's why you weren't around. And that's why we got some special guests on our cast.
Special thanks. We should probably name them. Special thanks to Everyday and Counterfeit, who did come in and cast 4 of the 8 games on the Saturday, which was our mega day. So thank you very much to them. We wouldn't have been able to do it without you. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
My throat thanks you greatly. 5 days of casting was a lot. 16 games in 2 days would have been way too much. So thank you.
Yeah, they really did help us out in a little bit of a pickle spot. If you're interested in finding more details about them, their social media will be in the show notes of this podcast episode, as well as in the description down below if you're listening on YouTube. Gentlemen, Initia1ise, though, we've done a bunch of thanks. We've mentioned a bunch of stuff about the LJL, but what is this podcast? What is this for someone that has no idea what we're chatting about?
So, this is a podcast where we talk about all things Japanese League of Legends related in English, notably. And this is kind of like peripheral content. We cover the games, but it's nice to dive in a little deeper, get some analysis out there, think about certain teams, answer some questions, argue a little bit about which way we don't have chance to do on cast. Yeah, get in a little bit deeper and add a little bit more breadth and depth to the LJL as best we can over here in the UK.
Yeah, and the LJL, for anyone not quite sure, is the Professional Japanese League of Legends Pro League. And it's an emerging region, but at the rate that we're going, we're going to be a major region before we know it, lads.
We know, man.
I mean...
Eventually.
Aria will take us there. I believe in him.
So, I mean, okay, this might be seen as naive by some people, but if you look at the PCS and the VCS, 2 regions which have 2 seeds going to Worlds, which have kind of taken up the mantle of the LMS as that's kind of disbanded and folded into other regions, I don't think the LJL is ridiculously far behind those regions, even if you're being very pessimistic about it. So potentially we get into that same tier at some point. That's what we're aiming for.
And if you've somehow gotten all the way here and you're not quite sure still what we're talking about, we're a podcast all about League of Legends, talking for specifically in Japan. Like, if you haven't figured it out, there you go.
Best of luck to you. Good luck in esports.
And continue listening, because you might learn something about this region, and you might be able to tell people, oh, I know all about the Japanese scene at the moment. It's very interesting. But if we're talking about this, we're doing all this work, Nymaera, surely we have some affiliation with Riot Games or their partners or Riot Japan.
You'd expect us to have a vast support network giving us everything that we need for all the right situations, and yet... turns out it's just us 3. How did that happen, lads?
Well, that is a vast support network. Do you underestimate our powers? Look how great myself and MaskedSwan are.
Yes.
And you don't have a vast support network?
Turns out it is... We only needed us 3 to put on a wonderful broadcast with some wonderful people and cast some... sometimes wonderful League of Legends, depending on who's playing. We don't have any affiliation with Riot. We don't have any affiliation with Riot's partners anywhere across the globe. We are 3 people making this on our own, and we're happy you're here to listen to our content, because presumably you are if you're listening to me saying this. Good job.
Good job. All these views and opinions are of our own and also do not represent the LJL Officially Unofficial Cast. This is us being more ourselves, less professional, more... flamey, true opinions, true colours will now be coming out. Think of this as kind of a few of the Riot podcasts where on the cast you won't hear Freak flame anyone. He just sounds a bit disappointed, like a dad where the region...
Freak's maybe the one example where you could say he is actually flaming, but yes. But no one's on the Kool-Aid.
When you talk about him on a podcast or something, he's unhinged there.
True.
And that's the way to think about it. On the cast, we might hold our lip a little bit. On here, we ain't got doing any of that. And
Depends if you.
Well, go for it. Go for it.
Depends if you're listening to the DFM Access game or the. We might have let it slip a bit on a couple of the games. Quite disappointed.
It's fine, but also views and opinions will be different, so that's absolutely fine. If you are interested in finding out more about the LJL Unofficial, or just us individual lovely people, you can check out our social medias and Discord, as well as also Counterfeit and Everydays, who we've already mentioned will be in the link description down below, or in the audio version of this podcast, which does go out on all major streaming platforms. So if you are a person that likes to listen in your car, driving to work, on the tube, or the underground, or subway, metro, there's multiple names for it, you can listen to us everywhere and anywhere. Download it on Spotify, listen to it on the go. I can do marketing and keep doing this. Gentlemen, enough about my past. Time to talk about the present. Well, the recent, past, present, whatever. We had Super Week. And, what a week.
Yes.
What a bloody mess.
Yes.
Can someone recap for any of our listeners what Super Week actually is?
So, we had a 3-week break between week 4 and 5, and then we had Saturday and Sunday where we had our 2 weeks together. So we had 16 games in 2 days, and now there is only 1 week remaining of the LJL regular season in the summer at all. So these 2 weeks, or really 2 days, were probably the most important 48 hours of the summer split for pretty much all the teams involved in the LJL.
Yeah, I think that was actually a really poignant way, and I just threw that on you at the last moment.
Yeah, so after this week, we have had all 6 playoff teams determined. The order is not quite there yet, but before this, we only had 1, and that was V3 at the top, being on their undefeated record. So, and actually, I mean, we'll get into it, but a lot of it was absolutely not what we expected. I think I could probably say there were 7 games which went against the grain out of 16. Almost that halfway mark.
Well, gentlemen, I will ask you to pull up your prediction document that I asked for both of you to do for our guest casters, as that will be a great way for us to go through some of these teams at moments, and when we actually, I'm just going to actually unhide it for all of us as well, so we can actually have an interesting retrospective as well of our expectations going in, and then the actual outcomes. Now, obviously, we do our predictions on Cast live at the time, and those predictions are a little bit more freeform as we are kind of seeing how the day goes on. I think I went against 2 of my predictions on live broadcast, as opposed to especially.
I think I went against 1. I think against 1, maybe.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not unusual for us to slightly go against, but obviously we get hindsight with these predictions. We get hindsight when we're doing it live on Cast, whereas we don't get that there. So we will be covering that for you, and also, if you are interested, dear listeners, we will also give a link for this document down below in our description or podcast document, so you can check out our unfiltered thoughts. We're going to be doing a recap this week where we actually talk about all of the Super Week as a whole, because as Nymaera and Initia1ise mentioned, this was a 48-hour period where this was potentially the most important 48-hour period. We saw 4 games for these teams, where normally we only see 2 in a week period. The break is also going to come into a lot of our thoughts and their narratives. Some of these teams leveled up, some of these teams didn't change, or maybe didn't improve, and as such, other teams got better. But we're going to start at the very bottom. And I'm going to make a quick one, and I'm actually going to switch out the bottom 2 teams, because I think one of these teams deserves to be tied 7th place, but they deserve to be the better of the 2 teams. And the first team we're going to talk about, gentlemen, is Axis. And my note here is very similar to the note that I had on our previous podcast. The only difference is I've added to it, with 2 subs, can they make it out in time? And I went, no, they can't. 0-4, and I mean, we weren't too surprised really to see this, were we, gentlemen?
Are we talking the Jesters here rather than Axis?
Yeah, this is Jesters. Yeah,
Oh, sorry, you said Axis, and I was like really confused for a second. Now I'm with you. Yeah, Rascal Jester.
Yeah, Rascal Jesters. We were always wondering whether they could pull it together with their unique brand of chemistry and look on the game, because they've always been quite unique at their outlook on the meta, regardless of who's been in the team. The answer to that has been no, they haven't managed to pull it together. They haven't. Their their laning fundamentals, their team fighting efficacy, it's just too weak for the LJL currently, and they got slapped around. They lost 4 games in pretty decisive fashion. I'm trying to remember if any of them were actually close.
CGA, they very nearly took down CGA with
that was the big one.
Art
Yes,
and Cog having a great game.
This is the really sad thing, because I do think that Hatchemetra and Cog had a really good Super Week. I was honestly wondering about putting one of them for one of the players of the week at some point. I didn't end up doing that. I mean,
Art as well, had
talk about it. And Art had some really good moments. So Rascal Jesters, they went 0-4. Did they look like they should have gone 0-4? Honestly, maybe not, but they did. They're out of playoffs, and they're stone dead last right now.
And
I mean,
yeah, go for it.
Go on, man.
No.
So I think I will say that like the substitutes were just clearly not at pro level. Frankly, they're not there yet. They were fresh out of solo queue, practically, or amateur teams in the grand scheme of things.
They'd only played in the Akibara and I think scouting grounds. I think Pink had played in a scouting ground.
I think Pink and Natsume played in the same scouting grounds team.
So
that's where I'm pulling it from.
Yeah. So
that's something like
top
and Nagi was a third place player in the Akibara thing, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
So that's the kind of place these guys are at. They are exceptionally raw. They're being dropped in at the last minute with no chance to be ready, really, and bluntly, they never really quite rose to the occasion. That said, Cog, Hatchemetra, and Art are more than good enough to be challenging the top tier teams in the region. Genuinely quite good players. Art in particular has shown some exceptional heights, generally speaking, throughout his time in the LJL. And I think while the Jesters are going to feel really frustrated with the situation that they've been put in summer, come 2021, I think there are players here that can at least look to negotiate for better places, or look to try and pull in other players to make that team better than it is at the minute.
Yeah, the Jesters got hit hard by the visa problems. That's the only way you can really chalk it down. It is going to be sad because depending on what's happening in backroom with money and everything, this could be a really bad thing for the Jesters, as obviously some of their main players didn't play this whole split now, and I don't know how that works with
Ninja and Vivid.
And I don't know how Ninja and Vivid are going to get paid. I don't know how any of this is going to work for when a payment program, because they're now substitute
That's a good
players.
point, actually. That's a good point. There's of course there's a whole clause or several on payment of players in the LGL thing, but I'm wondering if you actually have to play one or more games to get that. Whether you have to be I won't make any statements on that now, but I can go look back over the rulebook. But yeah, potentially that has some issues for them, and that might, of course, like you said, it might end up impacting whether they stay with the team, because Ninja and Vivid in particular were very important to their team. I mean, remember, Rascal Jesters finished 3rd in the regular season.
Partly off the back of those two players.
They had a 5-game amazing split series against CGA, which was a barnstormer of a series.
No, that was probably the best series we had in spring too. It was that entertaining, and and it's not like Art didn't reach those heights briefly again. He had one game this Super Week when he picked up Caitlyn for the first time in the LJL, and he only died once that game, and that was the death that ended the game. That's how good he was playing.
And even versus V3, he was the only one with like a relatively okay KDA. Like everyone else in his squad went like 0-7. But then there's some things.
But then how much of it can you just kind of chalk it up? But then they're also playing 3v5. And
that's just really tough. And playing 3v5 in someone else has leveled up, and some of our teams look genuinely excellent. That's not good.
No, it's not going to be good enough anymore, and I doubt I'm going to see Rascal Jester probably win any more games, which means they're probably going to go moving forward. I don't expect them to win in week 7, which just doesn't paint them in a great light. But this isn't a fair comparison for Rascal Jester, as this isn't the Rascal Jester weeks we wanted, and the one that we came in with all of our expectation predictions. I think we all predicted them to be at least mid of the pack, if not high.
I mean, there is now an interesting question which we can ask ourselves, possibly at some point in the future when we have to fill some more space, is where do we think that the spring Rascal Jester roster would have placed this summer?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because I would say that maybe at the level of Burning Core right now.
I kind of agree with you.
And they're kind of up there at the high. They're 4th right now or something. I don't know.
So,
we'll get to them later. But
I mean, even things like, not to go too deep in this before else, but like Vivid and Art probably, I think, would go toe to toe okay with somebody like Archer and Reiner as well, which would have been good news in a split where bot laners have generally been a bit quieter than we were expecting.
I mean, there's a lot that we can predict for the Jesters, but with that all said, they still went 0-4. They're not going to make it out of playoffs now, and this is not the Rascal Jesters we expected. So I don't. In all fairness, if these players had popped off, these substitutes had worked brilliantly. They haven't, and 0-4 isn't ridiculous. And we all predicted Rascal Jester to go 0-4 as well. So to be expected. A team that though, was slightly more optimistic about on this break, and if you're not quite sure, go listen to episode 24 of the podcast. I actually predicted a 2-2 week for Axis. However, it wasn't in this way at all.
Yeah.
But you know what, Axis? Why I said this on cast. Why do they always pull off their training weights at the very fucking end of the split and make them sweat out? And they went 2-2. They beat Sengoku and Crest Gaming Act. They lost to Burning Core and Detonation Focus Me, the two teams I thought they would beat, and then actually would lose to CJ and Sengoku. Okay, my notes here is just a little bit too late. Day 1 made a huge difference, and man, it feels like the old Axis. They even stopped CJ from having a perfect during Super Week. So
yeah. I just want to say, I thought that Axis might take down CJ pre-game. It wasn't my prediction going into the week, but after seeing the way the two teams played, I'm like, wait, Axis look like they're doing okay again. It looks like they've kind of, because particularly the telling game for me was they lost a game versus DFM where they had a really good draft, and honestly, they probably should have won that game. That's my opinion of it. They had winning situations at multiple points during that game, and the important thing is that they identified a clear path to victory in draft and then also going into the game as well. They did the same, and so then I was thinking, okay, CJ are probably one of the best teams to do that against on paper, because they only do one thing. They only team fight. Legit. They only team fight. So if you find either a way, like V3 did in their win against them in the first round robin, where they pick a death ball comp, or they have Karma and other Peels things working out for like your carry AD carry, then CJ can't out-team fight that. And also, you pick a safe lane versus Arya. Well, what Axis did exactly the opposite and said, we are never going to team fight. You are going to 1-3-1 and have global, so you never have a 5v5. And they fucking won. They did it. They did it. It's so sad. It's so sad that they couldn't do this earlier.
Like, I will say this, that I don't think day 1 was anything particularly special, but you didn't have to be special to be better than a top laner role swapped. And, like, this guy was on utility AD carries, like, what was he on? He was on Ashe mainly, and what else? Jhin, well, he did play the Kai'Sa game versus DFM, which was not good.
As well.
Yeah, so it was Ashe Varus, and the Kai'Sa game, which was poor. But like actually, his two utility sort of games were pretty on point in terms of the Ashe and the Varus, and it kind of meant that Corporal wasn't trying to carry dead weight, and they had Uinyan and Hoglet look a lot more alive on the map, which was just a massive...
That's a big part for me as well. Like, Corporal didn't have just a dead lane buddy.
Yeah.
Hoglet's
set was great. That kind of did.
In all credit to Inyan, he tried his best, but you can't play at that level in your off role. And the second he was back in his top lane, it felt night and day different. It was like, where was this Inyan this whole time? Why couldn't we just have you play just standard top laners and just try and figure random shit out? It probably would have been better sometimes if you played Renekton Senna in the bot lane and just try to go,
I agree.
Screw it.
I agree.
They didn't. They didn't have to because they got day 1 in time, thankfully.
Yeah. And, like, not that Uinyan isn't a little bit coin flip, but he at least is a playmaker, right? And Hoglet Axis in general were kind of lacking that, and Hoglet in particular was looking quite lost. Hoglet had a lot more... What would be the word? Direction, I think, is probably what I'll go for, particularly in that early to mid game.
And I wonder if...
like, outside of first clear and first gank, he looked very lost in previous weeks. He looked like there was more to be...
Yeah. They actually had a game plan. The game plan, exactly. Axis's game plans was the big thing which stepped up for me. Because, like I said, it happened versus DFM CJ. Both their games there, which DFM they obviously lost against CJ. They won both of those. I was like, hey, they've managed to identify themselves a way to win, which is better than previous versions of Axis this split.
So something I noticed through partly what you were saying there, Sam and Alex, was that Hoglet had looked lost. And then the second that Uinyan was back in the top lane, he stopped looking so lost. I wonder if part of it is because Uinyan is one of the callers, or one of the shot callers in the game.
One of the communicators.
Yeah, and I wonder if part of that is just he would yell at Hoglet what he needs. Natsume didn't do that, and that's why he played weak side a lot. And suddenly Uinyan comes in, they ganks top lane, and weak side wasn't a thing hugely for Axis in this Super Week.
So I have to say, so from my own experiences of playing competitively and from hearing other people as well, of course it's not the same level. I played a national university level, it's decently all right. But one of the big things about going into that, moving from something from solo queue or kind of just a fun mess about games of friends / something slightly organized in amateur tournaments is, what are you actually communicating? So if you're in lane, particularly in top laners too, you have to communicate a lot of things in a very efficient way, and then you kind of end up turning that back into just the very distilled things where you end up making a system of communication which your jungler and everyone else knows how to work off of. It's like saying, lane's pushing, lane's freezing, I can back at this point, I'm backing next wave, this guy's got TP and blah, blah, blah. And it's if you have this checklist in your head and this system of communication you've kind of bashed out with all of your teammates, replacing that with a rookie coming in, that's actually quite hard to teach, and I don't know whether Natsume had that. And that's all speculation, but I just know that's one of the big things rookies coming in can change, and that's one of the big things about veterancy. One of the things we praise Rascal Jester about is having that veterancy, and it helps you with the more weird shot calls, or those ones we've only got like a couple of seconds of opportunity. We're like, okay, this guy is... if he's cleared this, and this camp, he'll be here in like 5 seconds. You've got that amount of time to work, and you can make something happen during that time. Or the cooldowns of certain things. I'm wondering whether Initia1ise is better at that than Natsume.
Maybe.
Even though that might not come across in his mechanical play, it does help your decision-making for the rest of the team a lot more easy to do.
Yeah, and that's actionable stuff.
Exactly.
Also, bluntly, AD carry, you are follow-up to plays rather than necessarily a playmaker.
Oh, 100%.
And my impression from the way Initia1ise plays, he's like things like Kennen, Silence, even Quinn, where actually you are the one starting things off, and you don't get to do that on the AD carry. And I wonder whether Axis are
in Ash Varus you kind of can do.
Sure, yeah, that's true. But like even then,
he was never
he's at the same level as a
Kennen.
Kennen.
Contention, right? So like,
yeah,
I agree.
There's a lot that we could keep going on, but Axis finally went 2-2. They had a really strong week. In all seriousness, it felt like in all fairness, I do think some of their opponents didn't respect Axis as much, which is partly why they were able to go 2-2.
I am gutted for them, because if they'd gone 3-1 and they weren't perfect last week, potentially they can make it in.
But and that was part of my speculation. I was like, well, if they can go 2-2 and the Hawks keep playing at the level they were playing at, I was like, oh, this is also another way they could do it. Also, if Axis beat DFN, that also helps them a lot. Both of the teams ended up actually getting one win this during Super Week, which was like rats. But this is how it goes. Commiseration to Axis. We're all just a little bit sad that you did this so late and you only left yourself with 3 weeks. Whereas if you had done this for the first 4 weeks, then they fell apart, then they probably still make playoffs. Hilariously.
Yep. Sad thing, right? I think. Wait, did they lose a game versus Rascal Jester actually?
Yes.
Did, yeah.
See, if you pick that up earlier in the split, suddenly you're still in contention by the skin of your teeth, but you're still there.
Hey ho, that's all we've got to say about them, though. Time to talk about one of our locked...
Oh, they also beat Sengoku as well, like, what the fuck?
Yes, they did. They beat 1 and 3 or 1 and 2 at the time.
2 and 3. They beat the
2 and 3.
2 and 3.
That's so stupid.
Like that, and a team like that isn't going to make playoffs. Like that's
sucks. It sucks.
But a team that also
not consistent enough
did happen to be our 3rd place team is the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming.
Woo!
And okay,
what's happened to this squad?
I'm holding out hope. The Hawks feel power-upped. They could make a run if things keep working out like this. And this was something that me and Initia1ise really started hammering in after having Counterfeit on the cast. And it was like, well, this looked like a new Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks. This looks like the Hawks I was predicting to see back in Spring Split. Gentlemen, they're here, and they look half decent now.
Yeah.
They had some coaching staff changes.
I mean, they're pretty big coaches too.
Yes, they got in Awaker. And I'm trying to remember where he was from, actually. Let me go have a look-see.
So I'm looking at the coaches they brought in. Was
XDFM, XV3, X7, Rabbit 5. This guy's been around for a while.
So
this was that was January. The new guys are Sweet and Xandar.
Yeah.
Sweet is ex-Jinner and ex-Flash Wolves.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Xandark is ex-KT Rolster, KT Bullets, and LGD.
He also coached the Flash Wolves that Boogie was in, that won the LMS Spring Playoffs.
Oh, he was. So that was Sweet. So Sweet was Flash Wolves and did that. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, so he's also a newer coach. And this was also the same Sweet that got the Flash Wolves to MSI, and they had a relatively decent showing. This is the Flash Wolves where people always go back and talk about. That's got Boogie on it. We've talked about Boogie for ages. This is the coach.
It's not. I will add the caveat. It's not peak Flash Wolves. It's not like 2014, 2015 when they were like actual contenders.
But this is relative new history.
Yeah, like I mean, I know that Flash Wolves is a very tenured team, and whenever you talk about them, you do have to caveat like Season 5 Flash Wolves were really good. Season 4 were also around there too. You know, these guys were definitely like the Korean killers. These are the guys that were actually beating them.
Sure, but they came 5th, and they're only under. They're the highest wildcard team.
Yeah, well, the thing about LMS last year is like actually a lot of people were quite disappointed by Flash Wolves at MSI because they were meant to be. So this was like LMS in the downturn of things, but without going too deeply into that, they still took a game off Liquid. Good job for that. All the other stuff, but yeah, no, having any kind of attachment to that brand, even though the Flash Wolves are gone, it's an absolutely historical name, and anything connected to them has got something good going about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I mean, like, also their second coach, this guy Zandark, was with KT Rolster from 2012 to 2018 or to 2019. Like, that's fairly impressive on a roster that's had some impressive talent on it. You know, KT has, it's had Score come through it. It's had Smeb through it at some point. It's had...
remember, KT Bullets Season 3, best team in the world.
BDD, maybe?
Cacao Macnoon, possibly the best top in the world. At one point, Ole was on that same
this guy?
Yeah. Hachani, they made Arrow someday, Rookie, best mid laner in the world.
They current Smeb and all that other stuff. 2018 was arguably the best roster in the world besides IG. You know, that best of 5 was one of the phenomenal ones in history too. Like these guys have got pedigree. I know we talked about On Air from DFM, right? These guys are in the same ballpark.
Yes.
Ryu, there's another one. Gimgoon, currently on FBX World Champion.
And gentlemen, this was... let's come back to just the talk of coaches for the Hawks. This was something that we had mentioned in spring, something we really wanted to see. More backroom stuff. The only person we knew currently was Awaker, and we were like, come on, guys, there's clearly other problems here. We need you guys to communicate more. They did move Ramune out of that mid lane, moved Dasher into the mid lane, and we'd started to see some success, but even then we were like, it's not quite the level that we're expecting. Now that we've got this backroom staff, over this break, importantly, that it was announced that this was happening, there seems to be immediate impact. And I know that this is something that we need to discuss, gentlemen.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's probably the... Yeah, go on.
I will say this. It's Dasher and Tussle looking alive again, which is fantastic.
True.
Like, it's not that, like... There was this issue on the Hawks where they would go for plays like solo queue, and Tussle was left aimless without a jungle because people were ceding control in the ways they shouldn't be, and Dasher would end up dying in 1v2s and getting baited into kills that he should never have been involved in. The Aurelia game versus DFM is the one that really...
it was just impatient.
Really taught.
Impatient.
Yeah,
that's the word we use.
Whereas actually, over the Super Week, there was still flaws, and there are still some talent issues. Like Aramik comes to mind. He's not top tier player, but when it matters, when you can get the right talent rolling, namely Tussle and Dasher, their game versus DFM, the Lee Sin and the Echo was so good, man. And like the fact that they have got room to look more cohesive and get their talent in a system which allows it to shine is great news for the Hawks.
And we haven't mentioned yet, and I want your thoughts on this, Nymaera. Think about it. They played the Big Four. At the end of Week 4, they played V3, CGA, Sengoku, and DFM. These were the top 4 teams, and we were nervous for the Hawks going into Super Week. We were like, you have got the worst of the worst to go against.
We didn't predict them to win a single game.
No.
If you look at our prediction sheet, we didn't predict them to win a single game.
And they went 2-2.
Yep, they did. They did indeed.
They beat DFM and Sengoku, and they lost to CGA V3. And this was a strong showing from the Hawks, and this is why I'm so confident that if they keep going on this momentum, do you think, Nymaera, they're going to be able to keep going?
So, if you're asking a playoff best of 5, if they end up it depends who they play. I think that if they play DFM, given that they beat Sengoku and they beat beat DFM in Super Week, I reckon they could take a best of 5 off DFM. And there's going to be some mental gymnastics here, don't get me wrong. Because the thing about getting a playstyle change in a team happening this late into the split, or something markedly changing, they're an unknown quantity. And DFM are really, really good at dealing with known quantities. This is exactly what they hate, guys. This is exactly what they hate. So actually, I'm looking at this, I'm like, you know, if DFM get a best of 5 versus the Hawks, I'm suddenly sweating for them.
I'm already sweating for them.
I'm already sweating them because if they want to win the split, they'd have to go through the top 3 teams of like CJ, Sengoku, and V3, and I'm like, in each of them in a best of 5. So I'm immediately there like, oh my word. But then if first round is also against a team which potentially has like an X factor over them, which they might not be able to deal with, I'm like, oh my word. So yeah, going back from the Hawks' perspective of things, they have a lot to work with, and this is, I think the Hawks they finally have some positives to build on, whereas before it was just trying to nullify some of the negatives, whereas now they actually have like, hey, potentially we can use this. We know we can play this kind of comp. We know that we have these kind of picks. Particularly if Aramik is put into a winning situation, he looks like night and day. It's mainly if he's just put behind where things look a little bit awkward. But the 2 games where they were ahead, Aramik was absolutely absurdly strong as well. As much as it's also Dasher and Tussle, the rest of the team follows suit, and that's a big thing for me. So yeah, do I think they can go further? Absolutely. Depends on the matchup, but yeah.
I mean, I will add in that, of course, you know, this will be a number of the Hawks players' first time in a playoff scenario. I'm looking at that bot lane particularly, and rookies, especially rookie bot lanes in playoffs, can either go very quiet or just collapse, and neither of which is what you want from a bot lane. And that's always a flaw. That said, there is experience in Dasher and extreme amounts of experience in the likes of Tussle. So it's not like they don't have players to act as captains and players where they can rally around. But it's all, but like, for all that we can say, hey, maybe there's a world where they pull off a really big upset. We've also just got to call into mind that there are still issues here. Aramik's topside play on weak side is still a bit suspect. Bot lane, rookies in playoffs, always a bit suspect.
Put it this way.
But that said,
if the enemy team ever gets TF, you can basically just sack off that game and say, okay, top lane's going to get Dover and we're going to lose.
True. I mean, that is definitely something. But there are also certain teams who are very good at playing around the map, so it might also be better for the Hawks if they have that. They don't have that. They also have Ramune still in their team. He is just a substitute at the moment.
He's practicing top lane.
I mean, maybe. We also, like, that also, I think it's important, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Hawks are like, hey, we're going to do a best of series and then randomly throw Ramune in for, like, 2 of them. And people are just like, and they're just like, how the do we do this? And they've been practicing specific comps.
You do that against like Sengoku or DFM, which really like to scout out their enemy, and it can really throw them off, guys. Potentially can happen.
You can.
And like, would I flame them? If it didn't work out, yeah, you have all rights to flame them, but you can understand with the logic of it.
But think about it, they've got the coaches. They've now got the coaches for it, and they can make the decision.
Too.
Exactly. So they already had Aweka who had been having some decent showings, but this was his first time being a head coach, and we were like, we don't want to put it all on him because there were like it was him doing everything for this team from our knowledge. So it's like now he has supporting people to do it, and also he's the head coach still. He now has authority under what they say, as the other coaches are going to back him up. Now the players are going to have to start listening to them more. Who knows where they can keep going? But they've locked their spot currently in Super full playoffs, and they could also make a movement.
All right, I will actually potentially put down Aweka, actually, because bluntly, the amount of improvement that's occurred from having these 2 new coaches come in a very short amount of time, and how bad the Hawks were, dude.
Yeah,
like,
but my point is now that they're actually forced to listen to him. As he's the head coach now. Think about it. If he's been trying to say stuff and the players have been giving him pushback, now these other 2 coaches go, do it.
I think there's a lot of
coaching,
speculation.
Surely.
Oh, sure. But like,
there's a lot of speculation on that. I think that having...
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I think that, there's a lot of speculation on that, and I think I'm more leaning towards Sam's side about, okay, well, you had all this talent beforehand, how did it not work out?
I mean, they've benched Ramune.
Yeah.
They did, and that's a big thing, right? And maybe that is a dynamic between the player and the coach, but obviously we have no idea. Situation. We have no idea. So it might be the case that these 2 guys come in and they work as kind of like more of intermediaries, and that's works out better for them. Potentially they're more like positional coaches, and they've helped out in some of like potentially their game plans were okay, and then these guys helped them reach those at some point.
They are also 2 Korean coaches, and that might be also helpful for Honey.
Well, there's 3 Korean players on there. Tussle, Dasher, and Honey are all Korean.
Yeah, but like obviously Honey brand new rookie coming in, suddenly now having a Korean coach with tenure kind of like tapping you on the shoulder, telling you what to do, you're going to turn around and listen to that guy a bit more than the coach that doesn't speak your language and you're having to listen through a player.
Yes, and also the other thing is that I know that coaches have to distance themselves from like the friendliness of being actually in the same household or whatever as these guys, and it helps you have that intermediary, the middleman, to actually be slightly closer to the player while you can be slightly more strict. Exactly. And it helps you define that authority structure. I don't know what they've got in place, guys. I don't know. Maybe it is the kind of thing. Maybe it is the kind of thing where the authority's been split somewhat. Actually, maybe that's why it's worked out. But anyway, either way,
it's stepped up big time. And
either way, the actual visible results we've seen have been very pleasing to see, because it's an increase to our region, and it's another team which is kind of like hyper brawl style like CGA, but maybe with a bit more of a calm head on the shoulders at times.
Gentlemen, we just have to remember, obviously I keep going, oh, this was the Hawks. We all expected the Hawks in spring to be a top 3, top 4 team.
Yeah.
And now we're actually maybe getting that version of the Hawks we always deserved. And better late than never. A team, though, who had the second worst showing in Super Week, outside of Rascal Jester. And they almost... In some places, I know I'm going to rub Initialize the wrong way here, but they almost joined them in that bottom showing. Detonation,
crap week.
Focus Me, 1 and 3 after the break. I've lost all hope now, personally, for this version of Detonation Focus Me. These patches quite clearly aren't working for them. The dynamic just quite isn't there, and some of these players just aren't there. Dude, I hate to use a Twitch emote, but feels bad, man.
So, I didn't get to catch all of the games live this weekend, obviously, so I didn't get to do week 5 because I had other obligations. I managed to catch some of them, bits and pieces. But so what I've done is I've gone over and done some VOD review. I've done 2 games so far, one of them being a DFM game, the DFM game versus V3. This has given me a little bit more perspective, because I've actually sat down and like had a chance to pause and think about a lot of other stuff. Also, like, I'm doing it on my own YouTube channel and Twitch channel if you want to tune in at some point. Self-plug from the
check it out
stuff. But my big thing about DFM is that it seems like they have half their draft in order, and then they just absolutely fuck it in the second half.
They can't do the second half of the draft right. Yeah.
And it's beyond it. The problem for me, and why I am more towards Lexi's point of view, is that it's not just draft. They're also playing poorly with their draft, even if they do have narrow win conditions, which they've drafted towards. Literally, the only guy I can give praise to is Initia1ise. Initia1ise is the one guy just out there like, hey, I'm doing my job. I'm doing okay in the draft. Ebby is dying in lanes where he should never die. He's team fighting poorly when he's got the one... Like, there was a game with Vladimir against V3.
So bad. My days.
Don't get me wrong, I think the draft didn't work very well for him, but he still had one play pattern that would work. Because you know V3 were playing a hyper dive composition. They had Galio, Nautilus, and they had a Kha'Zix running around in melee range as well. Your job as the Vladimir in that game is to immediately all in the backline so they can't pile on in the dive. He goes back and tries to peel back, and he's not putting any threat onto an Ashe, which has no way to deal with the Vladimir anyway.
She had no summoners in so many fights.
Yeah, she just like it just had no like. There's an Ashe and no sums. Like go kill them, Vladimir. So Ebby, I'm of the opinion he's the best LJL player ever. He is looking middling right now. Honestly, he's looking like one of the worst top lanes if you're looking at some of their game plans. Seros is being okay, but he's not a playmaker right now. He's not picking out all the picks I'd like. I think if he plays stuff like Azir. If he plays stuff like Azir, I would like DFM a lot more, and Steel can't really pick up the pieces. I don't know where the problems end for DFM. There are a lot of them.
While we are all currently a little bit disappointed, I also want to pick up on Gang, as I am our resident support player. He's fucking kind of trash at the moment, guys. He randomly will walk into bushes and then just face check stuff at the moment. He's also, with the level of play that we're seeing from Bards specifically, his Bard game versus V3 is maybe one of the worst Bards we've seen at the moment in our region.
I agree.
And,
it wasn't great.
And this is uncharacteristic, as this was the just MVP we want to slam Gang basically in every single team. Now I'm kind of like, maybe he's 4th, 5th best.
If you want a really good example of this, again, it's the same team fight where Ebby needed to all in on Vladimir. It's the second Dragon fight.
Yes.
So there's a really big thing. So Ace has a huge flank, and everyone else is piling in from the bot side of river. They're on Dragon. They're on red side, so they can funnel out through the jungle. He holds onto his tempered fate, and he doesn't stop V3.
Doesn't use it at all.
And also, Ace then gets a 4-man taunt. Also, by the way, a fully charged Galio taunt does hella damage. He doesn't exhaust it. Suddenly, then you've got Initia1ise who's caught out with an Ashe arrow, taking half his HP, can't fight from that point. Seros dies as well. And it's like, Gang, you had 2 things you could do in that fight. You chose to do nothing. You have 0 for 4. You lose and basically you lose Baron off that too. So good job. Nice.
And like, again, with like like DFM had 3 awful games and a decent game versus Axis where they
had
were
my issues
also
about that one too.
Well, exactly. Well, but even then they were thrown the ball and they just had to run with it. But they played that one okay.
And
but they've also like.
But something in all credit to Axis, this is Axis. This is a renewed version of Axis, and DFM are only able to beat Axis. That's not a good place to be for DFM, right?
No, it's not. I mean, like that game versus V3 is probably the one where we've seen it the most. Where like the first 3 were what? Well, their first 3 picks were. Let me think. It was Trundle, Ezreal, and Bard. Fine first 3. They then basically.
There's some issues there. You don't blind pick Trundle anymore on this patch. That's the one big thing for me.
Yeah. I mean, I also Kha'Zix Trundle is not a fantastic magic Trundle at all. You end up getting slapped in the river.
That's a hungry bug.
Yeah. Like you get slapped in the river a lot. That said, it's like okay if you get someone else to be a frontline, then I can understand that, like having another frontline. But then effectively hit this point with 4th pick where they kind of know. Let me think. What were V3's first 3?
V3 picked Galio, Nautilus, and Ashe. So V3 have shown their hand really early into the draft. They're going to hard engage and they're going to hyper dive with Galio going with Naught. So they know exactly what they need to do. They need to pick anti-dive. And they do nothing of the sort.
At which point they basically lock. They lock in Ziggs like that. It's like, which is like. You don't 4th pick Ziggs there. Like, why would you? You already know what the mid laner is going to be. You don't need to pick that then. Like, you could have taken the Ornn and they basically had another frontline to go with the Trundle.
I would have preferred the AP Nunu out of it.
Oh, the Ziggs.
No, actually, and you know what? That wouldn't have actually been awful because at least you can stand an ult.
Because it's against dive. What do you say to dive? Not today.
So I don't think it's. So the big thing for me is that so they didn't ban Ornn. And then V3 immediately returned after the Ziggs. They didn't pick it either. So what you're doing is you're basically saying, look, we're going to counterpick mid with the Ziggs into Galio. It's not really a counterpick. You do okay. It doesn't particularly punish. Azir is better and that kind of thing, right? And then the Ornn goes through and suddenly you're playing against Nautilus, Galio with huge dive potential. You picked your Trundle for pseudo disengage, but that is literally it. You have a satchel too, but that is not enough because Ziggs needs to use that to distance himself.
So much more than that.
And then the Ornn comes through, and at that point you have another long-range engage tool from V3 with no way to counter it from the side of DFM. If Ezreal ever E's, he dies, the ult comes straight on top of him.
And another champion that's great at getting into the middle of a team fight, which only emphasizes the point of what they've been doing.
Exactly, yeah. So you give over Ornn, which is possibly the worst champion in your draft. You still have a way to potentially deal with this, though. You can 5th lock in Poppy. And that would have been fine, because you can stop it's really good against Kha'Zix, because Kha'Zix can never kill Poppy, she's too tanky. You can stop him from jumping away, you can wall stun him, you can also deal with the Ornn. There are a whole host of... You could also pick something like a Kennen. Kennen would not be awful, because much like the Vladimir, you can counter dive, but it comes with the CC and the instant burst, which means that fights kind of instantly won, and you have like that kind of...
For God's sake,
you're kind of a pseudo... You're like a pseudo frontline for like 3 or 4 seconds because everyone needs to get the fuck out of your way.
For God's sake,
Vladimir doesn't really have that.
I would have preferred a Cho'Gath. He has more CC than...
not Cho'Gath.
No, I mean over the Vladimir, I would have preferred it, frankly.
The ruptures are okay in late game, but it's not really the same kind of I would prefer something like a Maokai. That's okay. Yeah. So I was talking with Acclaimed, who's a guy who's done some LJL VOD review before that, and he looked at mine. We had some back and forth on that, and he largely agreed that. I mean, what was his champs? The stuff like Azir, Orianna would have been really good, so I didn't pick that. Pick the Ziggs. Pantheon would have been okay. At least you can kind of counter dive in some ways. Lee Sin with kick. You've already locked in your Trundle. You can't do that. Wukong, Gragas. You could actually go tank or AP Gragas top. Poppy, Ornn, Maokai, Shen. Anything like that. They chose to do none of the above. There's so many champions. None of the above.
But this is part of the narrative that DFM have been having throughout a lot of this. And Initia1ise, this is your kind of team. This is the team that you have supported hugely. And what is up with them? They went 1-3. No other team went 1-3. Everyone else went minimum 2-2 and 3-0 outside of the Jesters.
Yeah, I mean... It was even things like, I remember casting that last game we did on the Monday, where we went Burning Core versus DFM, and we were making the joke like, it's second Herald fight, oh no, DFM are our second Herald fight, and they just int it! They flat out int it! It's so bad!
Yeah, there's greater issues when, like, fighting dragons when they've got tier on Ezreal, and it's like, If you're doing that, you need to go Sheen first, not Tear, or Pickaxe. Either way, you have to get some damage, otherwise your AD carry is just going to get outfought because Ashe has earlier spikes on the components than Ezreal. And that's simple. That's so simple to do, and they're just flubbing it. They're being very disrespectful. They're trying to get themselves an early game advantage, and then they fug it.
Well, they get early advantages, right? They're up consistently 1,000, 2,000 gold, and then throw it really hard, partly because of their team cons aren't able to team fight at Round Dragon 3, which is the one they tend to int. See the V3 game, they just int Dragon 3. Or the other thing is bluntly, like, they have a really big vision score advantage over most teams. But it's not that, it's when are they putting vision down, and it's like well in advance of objectives, but then the other team goes in and sweeps it out much more sort of close to the objective, and then a setup around, and then DFM go, oh, all that gold we just spent on time we spent putting down wards was useless because it gets cleared out, and then we have to face check anyway. And it happens around second heralds, it happens around third drakes, and they get horrendously abused by things like Call of the Forge God was a massive one versus them. They just get like 4-man knockup multiple times. So they're trying to face check. I mean, and dying for it.
This is also one of the easier weeks that most teams had. Only Sengoku really had an easier week this week out of the top 4 teams going into Super Week. Their only hard match was V3, and we can just say, fuck it. They now lose to V3. This is not a DFM that is currently looking like they're going to Worlds. But if they at least go 3-1 and only lose to V3, at least we can go like, okay, this is a place where DFM can maybe rebuild and come out.
Maybe they can do something in playoffs.
Exactly, but now I'm not there. Sorry, Initia1ise. I'm not there for
No,
DFM.
I know. Neither am I necessarily. But I will say this, that I think, I know Nymaera has issues with the game versus Axis, but at least there were some of the fundamentals in that game were better. Like, Utspon and Gang slapped Day 1 and Corporal. Like, they put them down 20 CS in lane. They'd taken most of the turret plate. Day 1 then into dive top, and that whole dive top was crap by Axis, but DFM's response was pretty good. DFM's response was also pretty good, where Gang and Steel were, like, immediately there as the dive was happening, which meant that it was, like, the chance of it being turned around, or, like... Even if then Axis pull away from the dive, the fact is, like, with the amount of, like, hard CC people there, Wukong and Set have a lot of CC in their kits. Diving, that becomes harder. And also, Graves had collateral damage, so you can clean the wave and buy time. So then you can, like, it's like Utapon at that point took 3-4 turret plates at the bot time without another wave even there. So then you lose first turret even with the Herald. So, like, there's things where you go, okay, you get 3 Drakes, you've got good gold leads, you've responded to the dive attempt pretty well. Like, those are better fundamentals. But again, you're against the bottom team. You're against the bottom team in the league,
who've just changed a bunch of stuff as well.
It's against the
who also
and the thing about Axis is that they really threw. So there was a point during that top lane dive where they dived in with the Zoe flashing forward and the Kai'Sa ulting forward, literally straight into a Set and a Graves, and it's like, okay, so you die and you lose 2 people. They lose another 2 people in the back of it. 0 for 4. And Axis's comp is actually really good because DFM can't force on them very well. And if you get to a point where Kai'Sa is even behind in that game, as long as she's like somewhat stable, she carries the team fights really, really hard.
I mean, me and Initia1ise both during the cast were like, this is a great comp from Axis here.
Yeah. Because they managed to get the Malphite counter pick into Wukong, and Ebby's Wukong is not great. It's okay. It's
pretty good this weekend for once. I'll give him this.
But it's not great. It's not going to win the game solo like we've seen from Nap, Appman, and Paz at times. Or a couple of other top laners will just run over the game with that pick. Ebby probably won't.
Gentlemen, if you don't mind, can we have a quick recap on your thoughts on DFM so we can move on to our next team? It's been a little bit long. Nymaera, you go first. You finish your current point, and then please.
No, I had a lot of different points about it. Effectively, my main problem with the Axis game is that honestly, it wasn't really in their control a lot of the time. It was actually Axis playing poorly and throwing the dog a bone a bit, because actually, if Axis are any semblance of stable in that game, they end up winning a lot of team fights. We saw them in the very late game because somehow it got stalled out to that point, getting to a point where DFM could still very well have lost that game. If DFM are at the point where their 1 win this week is in a position where they were thrown that many chances, they have 0 hope for playoffs. They need to have some fundamental changes about the way they draft and the way they play.
Sure. And initially, your thoughts?
Their objectives around 50 minutes marks, that's like 3rd Drake, 2nd Herald, are crap. They have serious problems in the second half of draft. I will say I disagree to an extent with Nymaera about the Axis game. I actually played okay. That's not good, but okay.
Well, actually, I'm going to set you both a challenge now. I'm going to set you both a challenge. And this isn't really a challenge. It's more, if you want to do this, this is good content for us. And then it will be also interesting to do this as maybe something to VOD review. I want you to individually VOD review the DFM Axis game.
I'll do it after this if you want.
Individually. Yeah. I want you to both individually do it. And then...
Yeah, if I get a chance.
We will need to watch it all together as the three of us, each of the VOD reviews. And then we can go through our thoughts on it. If you're interested in doing that.
Yeah, I can do that.
Because then we're not getting also echo chamber and just disagreements. If everyone gets to... Because I don't care, really, about that game. But you two have very strong feelings. I lean more on Nymaera's side, but I also can very much see Initia1ise's side of things. There we go. But, okay, so you had a problem. What about the rest of the games of DFM? Because obviously Nymaera didn't get to see all of them for the rest of Super Week. Where they went
their week
3.
5 games were really poor, frankly. Ebby in particular really concerned me. Like, he just flat tilted, bluntly. Like, he was in a winning lane, up CS versus the Zorn, and then he gets ganked, and then just basically, like, mindlessly death pushes in a side lane. Like, it's bad, and doesn't team fight very well.
And then that only just got exaggerated. That started with the V3 at the worst place. It basically stayed there, but DFM got 1 extra kills in the next 2 games where they got 6, and I think it was like 16 and 6 and 17 and 6 or something like that. And the Hawks, and this was just, as we've said, this is the Hawks just continuously to do their thing. And then, this is why I wanted to do this, and then our next team, who are currently above Detonation Focus Me, and my god, gentlemen, do they look so good. Our current 4th place team, and in all seriousness, in my notes, I'm a little bit more cheeky with them. Okay, Burning Core. I now have them as my 3rd place team. I'm really impressed with them.
Me too.
Keep it up, Burning Core. Your whole comp is coming together. I do have a caveat with your AD carry or your bot lane carry, but every other member of Burning Core is looking phenomenal now. They're working around each other. They went 3-1. They beat Rascal Jester, Axis, and Detonation Focus Me. Gentlemen, Burning Core during Super Week.
Oh, yeah.
I think that Rayfarky and Proud had such a good weekend.
Yeah, they did.
Once we've kind of expected him to pop off now, and that's something which, you know, saying that on what was previously a mid to lower tier team was a bit of an anomaly. Now he's actually got a bit of a support crew with him who are going in with him, making other plays so he can actually not be the primary playmaker.
Yep.
Burning Core look pretty solid. Yeah, there is that caveat of Yuhi. Okay, yeah, Yuhi's probably our worst AD carry in the league. He's really not
he might be
great.
there.
He's not been great. And Yu-Gi-Oh! I still have issues with. I think he's okay. He's not going to be your playmaker, but that's okay. They found playmakers from other roles now. He's not going to be the issue. If they manage to at least survive bot lane and keep playing stuff like Ashe, which has utility outside of just doing damage, Burning Core looking like the blue shell for the upper end of the table.
Yeah, and
like
also, bluntly, it's harder to ban out once again than it was before. Like previously you could effectively ban 3 champions and then once would not be able to have the same carry impact he would on other ones. The fact that, you know, he pulls out the Kha'Zix 3 times, and the Graves.
He got it for day one of Super Week, but then it was repeatedly banned against him.
Yeah, but then he had the Echo game,
because they were on blue side, and then on red side, first ban on both Sengoku and Detonation Focus Me was that Kha'Zix because they just saw how dirty he is with it.
Yeah, so like the fact he's pulling out things like the Graves and the Cast, we've seen from him before, is fantastic news for Burning Core because they are so reliant on this guy to basically snowball them ahead alongside Rayfark.
And in all credit to Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, went 6-2-14 on the LeBlanc, and really, and I mean, this was also a confidence game. No offense, Pink and the Jesters, but this was a confidence game for Yu-Gi-Oh! To play something like this. Well, I think he had 20 Magi stacks at the end of it, or something stupid like that. He was just running around, just going, lol, lol, yay! League's easy when your team's really good around you.
Yeah. And, like, people are going to have to respect the Darius again as well, because Rayfark had a...
Oh, it was
like
he was having so much fun, wasn't he? Initialized.
Yeah, he was exactly, and like they had a comp where the Darius actually worked better as well because effectively they had the backline.
Oh, I think Nymaera was waking up around this time.
Yeah, like they had the cards.
And then I crashed in that game, but I saw the result. I'm like.
Yeah,
Darius worked. Darius is working. It's the sign of the apocalypse.
Well, it's Darius with a Galio to back him up alongside a Kha'Zix, and even dumb things like you can throw down the Tempered Fate, and it's like now Darius can sit there warming up, preparing to swing as the Tempered Fate ends, like that kind of thing.
Oh, and we must give credit to Proud on this Bard. I think he's the best Bard in the LJL.
He was so good. Like, days.
He had like he
landed a 4-man Tempered Fate against Axis and basically ended the game because of that.
They did like a 3-man one which won the one fight into a 4-man one. He also had like one which very nearly saved his AD carry, like basically statusing the 2 enemies. And
he was completely out of position.
Oh my word, this guy is hard. He was hard smurfing.
Oh, it was so good. Like, and it helps well that I think Yu-Gi-Oh looks more confident on stage as well. He's less timid. Like the Galio game was better, the LeBlanc game was great, but we said that the massive caveat that pink is a step below again, so it's always easier to look good there.
But then he looked good against Syros on that Galio. And this is the same game.
Was it the Galio? Yeah, exactly. He did. I mean, he was down 30 CS, but and again, DFM's team comp was DFM's team comp was crap. We went over that. It was a bad comp.
Also,
over that.
Proud smurfed on Alistair. That was the first Alistair I've seen.
So good.
And it was
so good.
smurfed. He's just like, lads, I want to bring out. You can't
the flash headbutt pulse. So good, man.
Besides like some of Reiner's best games, these are the best support performances we see in the LJL.
But look at what DFM had to ban. They had to ban that Kha'Zix, and then the next
We're
person
back
they
on
banned,
DFM, guys. Move it on. Move it on.
Sorry. But Burning Core,
They're looking good.
We could gush about them for another 20 minutes like we did for DFM. But I don't think we need to gush about Burning Core.
No,
I think we want to just see... Because they're now, I think, as I said, in my heart, they're a third-place team. I want to get your opinion. You agree with me, okay?
I do. Yeah, I'm with that with you. I will say I could see them going fourth, and I will say I think there are... If they have to rely on Yu-Gi-Oh carrying against better teams, they're in trouble. If they have to rely on Yuhi being the only carry against better teams, I think they're in trouble. That said, if these guys can just role play, and the fact that we are getting more utility carries at ADC at the minute, that's great news.
Yeah, I think my worry is their last week is against V3 and the Hawks. And I actually think the Hawks can do a decent... I mean, I think Burning Core have clear paths they can win against the Hawks in, particularly Rayfarki being just awesome right now. He really turned on his performance in the Super Week. If he gets going against Adamic, the Hawks don't have much hope. But then also, if Dasher gets a good matchup into Yu-Gi-Oh, I still don't think Yu-Gi-Oh is the best defensive laner.
Nope.
I think he only really does well when it's a passive lane where he can scale into team fights.
The Hawks did win that game last time as well, when they had worse coaching staff. So
I would expect them to win against the Hawks, I think, just given off of current form. I think the Hawks are good, and that's why I'm like, that one's like a 60-40 prediction.
That's more of a big thing. In my head, I think Hawks versus Burning Core should be way higher in the standings than where both of these teams are currently sitting.
On current form, they are doing really well. I think that when it comes into playoff best of fives, I'm a little bit worried because I wonder if you know that once is going to play something impactful. If you just ban away someone like Yuhi or Yu-Gi-Oh, then I'm like, okay, maybe the team comp falls apart. The question is, how hard can these guys carry? Pretty hard from what we've seen. And if Rayfarki and Proud are playing setup for someone who can carry as hard as once, they do look formidable. I don't think it's enough versus the top 2.
Sure.
I think that Sengoku and DFM might... I think DFM right now would lose to Burning Core in a best of 5. I wouldn't be 100% confident in that because DFM might come into it super prepared, but there's a lot to be working out. Round 1 is going to be really good.
Yeah. And this is on my personal current standings place. I mean, playoffs is a whole other beast in and of itself. But gentlemen, let's talk about our actual current third place team who well, if in all honesty, they're now 8-4. They went 2-2. This is a disappointing performance, and we all predicted far better things from Sengoku. We all predicted them to go 4-0. They had the easiest reign of games across Super Week, placing against all 4 of back then, the 4 bottom teams, and they went 2-2, beating Rascal Jester and Burning Core, but then losing to Axis and the Hawks. Where do we think Sengoku are at the moment?
All right. Yeah. So, we finally saw Pyrian get punished really hard in lane multiple times. Like, it's been a kind of a challenge for a lot of the LJL teams largely to punish Pyrian's kind of control mage, spellbook mid laners, like the Victor is the one that comes to mind, and versus Axis in particular. Hoglet and Gariadu put him in the dirt. He went 2 and 5. And the fact that once that mid lane crumbled, Sengoku Gaming look way more
fallible.
Fallible. Exactly that. They really rely on Pyrian to be a rock, and also without Pyrian kind of being free to back up Blank in roams to the top lane, Appamen gets caught out more often too. Like, he got in a lot of trouble versus Uinyan, and
that's the big thing for me. Appamen looked very suspect.
Yeah, and like significantly more inconsistent. And also, like, the game versus the Hawks, I think, was the most telling for me versus Appamen, where they banned where effectively in that top we had Camille, Aatrox, Renekton, Mordekaiser, and Wukong all taken away. And then and Set as well. And then the Hawks picked Kennen, which left a last pick Gnar as Sengoku's choice in a team comp.
You last pick Gnar there.
But this is a thing that's been true of Appamen. Like, I know a lot of the LJL themselves, analysts, have called out this for Appamen basically since he took a break last year for various reasons. And he came back in with serious champion pool issues. And we thought maybe that had been solved in summer. That game might make us question that again, that effectively you ban out a few of the most famous ones. And, like, he ran out of options for himself. We know he played the Yorick, but I don't think that makes that much difference in that game.
You could play the GP, though. I think they could play GP, and that'd be better.
Yeah, and he didn't. And, like, but, like, this was a question mark. It was like, okay, well, what do Sengoku do if you really hard focus Appamen? And, yes. That was
also, if you don't have something like a TF to bolster him. Because if you have a TF going top lane, maybe it's different. But, yeah, my opinion of Sengoku is that, I don't think that drafts were the root cause of their issues. I think that, put it this way, whereas I put, like, DFM, like, maybe, like, a larger percentage of their problems on the draft, Sengoku, I don't think it killed their game. I think that having... So when Sengoku lost to V3 in the first round robin, it was against a hyper-ganking Trundle jungle, which upset the lanes. The two games they lost was against a hyper-ganking Volibear in both games. Different teams played it. And it looked like Sengoku were not tracking the jungle.
Set for one of them.
The set and the Volibear. Okay, so what? Yeah, one of the other.
They played Volibear in that one against Axis. That's why you might be getting confused.
Okay, yeah. No, I saw it on the draft. Like, got a headache running. That's what's happening. But if I think that Sengoku, if they're not tracking the jungler and they're also not warding well, I mean, Victor is one of the most gankable mid laners in the game. He is very, very easy to abuse, and every time that Hoglet on Axis was going for him, it looked like Sengoku were like a good 20 seconds behind the play.
Yeah.
To his credit, Pyrian still was a factor in that game, somehow, and that is a testament to how good he is as a player. But when behind, he just doesn't have the same ability to impact the game. Blank was, again, kind of back to some of his weaker spring games, being a bit of a non-factor. And then you're telling me Ashy has not really been crushing lane alongside NT the way they've been doing in spring. And that's the thing, because there's no pressure valve for Sengoku if Appamen is not soaking lots of pressure and also not inting. So a lot of things went wrong for Sengoku all at the same time this week in Super Week. So I think that Sengoku, they need to draft a little bit more defensively. I think you can't just let Pyrian out to dry, although one time he lost on his LeBlanc, and that is not the easiest thing to gank either.
It was not a great LeBlanc game either, actually. He went 0-4-3, got really slapped.
Dasher was trading really well against him. He was ganked pretty hard. I think that when you're playing the Nidalee jungle in both of those games, I believe it was, then that stops some of your setup.
No, it was the Volibear, the first one.
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, and Blank.
Oh no, he also played. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant that day rather, because he did play with Blank.
The two losses.
Right, sorry.
The two losses was Volibear and a Nidalee. Otherwise, his Nidalee went 4-0-9 and 7-1.
Okay, yeah, no, that was fine.
Like, he had a 35 KDA coming into.
They played the same mid jungle in two different games. And they had one with both Magi's no deaths, and then the other one which was kind of Pants versus the Hawks. But yeah, I think Sengoku really need to step up in what they're doing in terms of their early game tracking and rotations, and they really need to step up in the laning phase. Appamen needs to sort out his champion pool. It's going to be a big issue going into playoffs.
I mean, if I can add in on Pyrian here as well, like, this weekend was the first time as well we saw teams kind of say screw it, and not just like half gank Pyrian, but like, we're going to dive your tower. And a lot of LJL teams have been really afraid to dive mid lane outside of, say,
But before he's been managed to fend that off. Remember the game versus DFM who was playing
But they
TF,
didn't go under tower. But
yeah,
like,
they
whereas
did.
this one...
Remember when they played the Jarvan into his TF and he was like surviving like 3-man ganks and he only died like once or twice that game.
I'd have to go back and look at it.
Yeah, it was the second DFM game.
Sure, but
okay.
moving
forward... They pulled it off super well this weekend where like Pyrion was getting slapped under his turret, not just like trying the lane, gank the lane. It was like going even more aggressively to
Let's
get
go back to
into
more of an overview of Sengoku moving forward, though, because next week they're going to have a real rough week, as they're going to be playing against first and second seed in V3 Esports and Crest Gaming Act. Two teams we haven't talked too much about, but they are still the first and second seed. They were tied with Crest Gaming Act coming into this week, and they didn't have anywhere near as a good week as Crest Gaming Act did, except for a small caveat, which we'll get to in a moment, which we've already touched on with Axis. But Sengoku moving forward, they're not the same Sengoku before the break, if for me. Really?
Not nearly as consistent. Not nearly as consistent. That added variance makes me worried for their playoff chances. Because whereas I think their highest high is probably not as high as someone like V3 or CGA,
sure,
consistently they were probably better than someone like CGA.
Laning fundamentals.
Yeah, because they just CS better. They hit minions better than other teams. That's one thing, and then they just turn up to fights really well. And they kill dragons really well. But yes, going into playoffs now, I'm like, there's a good chance they can drop a series if they have a couple of tough games. I
mean, their loss versus the Hawks actually, was one of those ones where went, oh dear, they actually don't have any lane advantages just from out CSing. Like they came into mid game even, and it weren't pretty.
It was not pretty at all, and I mean, in all fairness, the teams they lost to played very well against them. They didn't even give them much of an opening. The Hawks and Axis both beat them, where Sengoku only got 5 kills and 4 kills respectively, and the enemy team for the Hawks got 17 and Axis got 18. So they were put over pretty hard once they actually were able to close out or attempt to start closing out the games. However, let's move on to our second place team, Crest Gaming Act. They went 3-1, almost a perfect week, if it wasn't for Axis at the end. However, still very well played by Crest Gaming Act. A weird last game for them. They should have been the team that went 4-0 this week, as should have Sengoku Gaming. They didn't. CGA had an upset, as they did also, and more importantly, deny V3. We will talk more about that for V3 themselves and the streak and everything else, but CGA looked pretty strong, except for one game, which was not how it was. We took it.
Okay. Of everyone that supported Aria through this trying time, I want to thank my family, I want to thank my friends and my coaching staff for making this possible.
Alright, it was a mistake, and look, I will put this out there. It was 2 strong games and 2 really sloppy ones.
God,
like their game versus the Jesters. The game versus the Jesters was real bad. Like they almost lost that game versus the Jesters. Like really hard.
Legit, CGA only team fight. If you draft a comp which Arya can't butt his head against, he can't win. If that's how you beat CGA, if you make him draft something like Melee into Ken and Galio, they just lose the game. We saw that during playoffs last split. We've seen that in all their losses this split too. If you end up, they are just hilariously good at team fighting though, and a lot of that's off of Nat playing really well. And Gango having a bit of an odd champion pool to boot has helped their bot lane issues too. It's not just Arya doing stuff. Also, CGA playing red side to get a guaranteed counter pick for Arya makes it more likely they will get a draft advantage for the mid laner in particular. And in the 2 games they won, that's how they crushed those games. Arya just popped off.
Yep.
Well, actually, no. And the other one they'd win. The 3 games.
And also worth saying that there's something to if you look at their mid game stats, they are nearly guaranteed to be down 1,000 gold and down objectives, and they're coming in with disadvantages and just team fighting so well. It's not even team fights early, it's team fights around 60 minutes plus where they are winning a lot of their fights. Like the game versus Sengoku where we talked about Gango and Nap on Ornn just slapping people. I think we had a game of Nap's Ornn this weekend as well, if I remember, where he managed to...
Yeah, so it did. It was against the Jesters.
Yeah, which he kept them in that game quite a lot with some really important knockups, and really Grendel's Bard really keeping them in that when they deserve to lose a lot of those fights. This is the kind of thing we're saying, okay, CGA, you have these team fight mechanics. And so they had the game versus the Justice where it was really sloppy, but the other one I do want to highlight, which was a bit of an eye-opener, was the one versus the Hawks, where it was that kind of coin flip Gango I am a Draven player lane where he got 51% of the team's damage in that game. 51%. They absolutely rumbled that game. They got 2 turrets bot, put Honey and Poo in the dirt. Arya just didn't get to do anything that game because he didn't need to, because his Ashe was flashing into 4 people and murdering them all.
In that game, the enemy mid laner did almost twice as much damage that Arya did that game, because the Arya just didn't have to do anything because he couldn't do anything because Gango killed them all. It was phenomenal.
Man, it was something.
Grendel that game
something.
had only, I think he had 90% kill participation, only missing out on 1. This
because it was all in lane.
It was phenomenal. And let's talk about that game versus Axis, because I think this truly shows what happens when CGA don't get to play League how they want to play League, and a team just goes in pick and ban phase, goes, no, fuck you, no, we're doing it our way, and then CGA goes, what? Arya's just like, guys, I'm 504. How can we lose this? Oh fuck.
Yeah. Arya had a Zoe into a draft which never front-to-back team fights. They had a Quinn into an Necton. They had a TF fucking off to the end of the map. And, like, Axis basically just said, look, we don't care if Arya's going to pop off. We're going to pick something where he can just never fight. They picked TF. They did manage to kill the TF multiple times. We were getting a little bit worried because Arya was getting to the point where he could legitimately one-shot pretty much everyone
they
on
killed
the
him
map.
twice.
He killed him twice, and there was a point when...
Once in team fights, once in lane, I think.
There was a very scary point where Axis slid into their 1-3-1, for 30 seconds, and then a bubble lands onto day 1. He just immediately dies, and they lose like a turret mid. It's like,
they lose Corporal as well, from what I remember.
This is why I was a little bit worried for Axis, because I'm like, hey, CJ are really good at finding random fights, and they very nearly did that to win the game. But then CJ kept fishing for fights, kept pushing needlessly, and particularly their bot lane got caught out pushing up in mid a number of times with Quinn and TF flying back in, and Arya wasn't there to kind of clean up the play. There was a particularly really important moment at the Baron when CJ got picked, they moved over to Baron, and then Day 1 and Ernyan on their double AD carries managed to root them up with the Varusol, and then just like, when they tried to turn off a Baron, they took down like 2 people. Arya wasn't in range for a paddle star, and suddenly like CJ lose all their advantage, they lose the Baron off of that, and suddenly that's pretty much game over.
Another important champion for me in that was Corporal on that Thresh, because the amount of times Crest Gaming Out were about to get a pick on someone, that Lantern always seemed to be there and go, nope, yoink, and then immediately the Crest are like, who do we collect? Fuck, we've already used a TP for this. Shit, what do you mean? What do you mean? Nap's already used TP. Fuck. And then that happened like twice for them.
I'll also say for Corporal, like, that was a big redemption as well, because his Thresh game versus Gang and Utapon was bad. Like his level 1 where he walks into set and Gang and Utapon kind of run over the lane from that point. That was a really bad face check.
And that was a game where, like, if the Kai'Sa is any semblance of even, they win as well. So that's really kind of awkward.
Well, Kai'Sa in lane at the minute's not that great though.
Well, no, Kai'Sa's really good in lane versus Ezreal. That I will contest that. Well, Kai'Sa is an Ezreal counter in lane. I have heard that.
You play the champion, so I'll take that one.
I've talked to many.
She's also really good against Athelios Thresh lanes at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Kai'Sa is actually a lane bully against Ezreal, because you get Hail of Blades and you can hit him with a single target Q, take the short trades and win. So I've heard that from coaches and from pro players.
But they didn't get that opportunity because Gang was playing set and said, fuck you.
They kind of,
And what's really good against Kai'Sa? What's really good? Oh, you're diving into me? Come at me, I'm the pit boss, bruv.
Yeah.
Ashe is really good versus Kai'Sa.
Sure, I can see that, yeah.
She bullies her in lane.
Why DFM banned her?
Karma, really good against Kai'Sa, because you don't get to play laning phase as well.
Axis banned her.
But yeah, anyway. But like, specifically for the Axis game as well, like, this is also an issue where I still have issues with CGA, is like, they don't play to their game plans from draft that well. Like,
fair.
Where,
I mean, this
draft was supposed to be, like, so let me explain for this, like, come and yell at me afterwards, but, like, the idea was that, you know, Axis had drafted a strong top side of the map where they were going to have Quinn into a Necton and win that lane super hard. And then on the bot side of the map, CGA had Kalista Nautilus, and they were going to look to slap that one with Graves coming in as well. And, you know, like, great. Once you hit level 6, you throw Nautilus in, there's all the CC, pull out the spears, and everyone dies. They then basically, for whatever reason, CGA gank the top side of the map, and Yeah, exactly, and they do try to break down the Quinn lane, which makes sense. But then on the bot side of the map at the same time, like, yeah, you get a kill onto Uinyan, good work, done it, got the summoners, that's a good start. And then your bot lane, because it's Gango and Grendel, like, all they do is press the foot to the floor and, like, decide they're playing NASCAR, not League of Legends, and then go straight forward and get balls to the wall slapped. 0-3, they end up in that lane. Like, off a lane, they should never have lost that way.
No, if you're trying to say that they shouldn't have ganked top, that it, like...
No, they should have ganked top. No, I don't disagree with that, that's fine.
So, I mean, I peaked at D2 playing Quinn, which is, of course, not like Master Grandmaster, but, like, I've got a decent amount of experience playing that at somewhat okay levels. If you die pre-6 on Quinn, game's over. Game's pretty much over. You fall behind an XP, and Uinyan blowing both summoners and dying and not blowing any other summoners, that is worst case scenario. You did that at like level 4 or something. You can't even get back to lane. At that point, like, what was meant to be like a 30 CS lead and 2 turret plates in top lane became very even, and that's scary for the Quinn. Because then you have to start doing some weird shit around the map.
That, you know, so that wasn't, I was trying to go on from that saying, like, okay, so you got this top side moving, then you just need your bot side not to int.
Exactly,
Like,
and they shaded to 3 kills.
So that was kind of my point. It's like, okay, so you've got a, you know, like,
but that was the funniest thing in the world to watch Initialize cast. Because let's stop talking about it so seriously. Because let's be real, that was like, we could hear the Fiesta music going. Because they kept walking into them, and it's like, guys, stop walking
back into lane to die.
Do I have a clown voice?
Like,
no, there is no clown voice.
Like, welcome to Disneyland!
Like
free food and happy times for everyone!
What really killed me, was Gango had just seen Grendel die, because they dived him, and then he just goes, fuck it, I'll be alright, lads! And then they just kill it, and then it's suddenly like, day 1 Corpora and Hoglet just go to Uinyan in the top lane, just go, hit. They're like
NPC. They're like NPC guards around an outpost. Like, must have been the wind.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god, you're still here, and like Hoglet's just like.
Why is there a body? Why is there a body with a slit neck on the floor?
You have to imagine
the throat-slitting wind.
You have to imagine Hoglet and day 1 at this point. Hoglet's just like, guys, they just keep doing. I know how to beat everybody now, and imagine poor day 1. Second day of Super Week, his last game, he already beat Sengoku, he's now gone 0-2, probably feeling a little bit down about himself, and I was just like, these guys are good, I'm playing Varius and I'm just schooling them, and he got nerfed.
It's like
they knew they were on the weak side of the map at that point.
Yeah.
Like, Jerry from Rick and Morty. It's like, I'm not proud of this, but I kept crawling and it just kept working.
Yeah, that's got to be Hoglet right now, he's just like, I just kept ganking bot, and they just kept coming.
Like, yeah, especially because, you know, they had hard ganked the Quinn, and the Quinn was in dire straits, and then, like, you're thinking, oh, no, it's great for CGA, and then the bot lane Fiesta.
Yeah. I think I said
CGA,
that
you
on
can't
cast.
do that.
I think I said that on cast. I was like, it's all over now, and then that happened, I went, well, fuck.
And then Quinn got back into the game as well, because they turned around the later gang.
Yeah.
Because, like, they tried to gank again, and yeah, they zoned her off for the tower and a lot of XP, which was not good for the Quinn, but it wasn't killing her again. And then she still managed to hold on to a 20-ish CS lead. So it's like, okay, you got the Quinn down, but then she's not out, and she managed to get back in. And then the bot lane, Callista, Nautilus, yeah, we'll just, you know, with the Renekton as well, like, okay, we just hard force around objectives, snowball that. I think, was I right in thinking CJ also... Was it Ocean Soul potentially on the board that game? That was their one potential win condition. Couldn't secure Ocean Soul.
They did.
And, like, at that point as well, it's like, okay, so we can't secure Ocean Soul. Our bot lanes put themselves in the dirt, so we can't set up around that. Quinn's split pushing in a side lane. It still ended up in a massive Fiesta at the end where TF teleported, like, gated into the base to throw a gold card and win it at the end.
A big part of the problem when it came to the mid to late game when they're doing team fights, Arya's just in the background going, guys, I got a pick, and then the rest of the team's dead before anything else happens. Because Zoe doesn't work for that comp.
It's literally like the 2 ways to beat Arya and CGA is like you either make sure that Arya cannot ever fight because if he dives into on a melee range carry, like he just loses the game.
Yep.
Or it doesn't matter if he kills you, no one else is there. It's literally like, oh, guys, I got a double kill. Why the fuck are they on my base?
And that's basically how Axis worked. They were just like, lol, Arya wants us to play. Nah, let's not play. Let's pick everybody else off. And then Arya's like, fuck!
Yeah. I mean, like, it's scary how close you got to winning that game just off of being really good at Zoe in a comp where Zoe doesn't work.
I mean, like,
it's scary. It's genuinely scary how close that got. But
I mean, like, that game versus the Jesters, it was 28 kills to 90. It was a bloodbath of a game. And, like, again, it was Gango and Grendel just playing super disrespectfully and then Hatchemetra turning up. And, yeah, it was turned back and forth a bit there. And Arya turned up to pick a double kill at one point when the dive was trying to go on. But, like... it's that same deal where, like, potentially you can devolve games into CGA into where they're going to pick a fight, and you can punish them for picking the fight. Like, all across the map, they don't respect. They don't really respect.
They don't respect the map. They don't really play around each other brilliantly because they just want a team fight. They want to just get to the 15-minute mark and team fight as fast as possible. They don't want to do the laning phase. They're like, that's cute. Let's team fight. Let's team fight.
Well, like, it's specifically when Nap isn't weak side, I think.
True.
Because when the bot lane has to play weak side,
CGA
like they don't play weak side. so Nap plays weak side super well. But like in the 2 games where like actually Hachimachi was always going to focus bot, like in like versus, and then like in the last game versus Axis versus CJ where they actually do lose, you know, day 1 and Corporal, like it's Hoglet turning up and making it. You know.
No, I mean we saw this with well, I think actually for the top 3 teams, so Sengoku being in this case as well, they have all historically lost when their bot lanes have just been crushed, right? So V3, we saw that when Archer tilted off the face of the planet in a couple of games versus CGA, and then versus DFM as well, right? Again, just didn't work out for him very well. We saw that when CGA lost to V3 in the first round robin, it was the vertical jungling, and I have pretty often said Gango cannot play from behind. If you set up with vertical jungling, things get awkward. One of the big things about the V3 CGA game is that V3 didn't have a strong enough level 1 jungler or support to do a vertical jungle, so then they couldn't walk in and do that themselves. Gango kind of survived, and CGA just ended up team fighting around that. Sengoku versus DFM, they got put on weak side in the finals, and they got absolutely crushed. Like, there's so many LJL teams who just don't know how to play weak side bot lane.
But
and that's
it's
kind of distressing as a region.
But let's just pull it back here, because we haven't talked about all of our teams yet, gentlemen.
Yeah.
And we still do have V3 Esports to talk about. In my notes, I've got them the best team, but I'm questioning myself a little bit. Been shown to have some weaknesses, but in all fairness, they're still very, very good. They went 3-1. They did lose their streak. They tied their streak with DFM before Chris Gaming Act came along and slapped out their hands, said no more. But then they also then went on to the next day, picked up their little bags and went, guys, we're really angry, and then promptly demolished the Hawks and Rascal Jester. And it wasn't even close. They just were like... That was angry.
V3 was so angry, Ace carried.
Yeah, like
and hard.
6 games, Ace was so good. Like his set ended up like up CS against a Lulu. Like, how do you do that? He went 4-0-18 on like this ridiculous diving.
But then that is the caveat. It is pink.
Yeah, that's again. It's pink again. Exactly.
And it's not fair to put a challenger guy versus a diamond guy, is it? Like that. Yeah, it's a bit rude.
Also, like. Arya versus Gariadu, like
someone who's played versus challenger mid laners, yeah, it's kind of nasty.
So like, then it was not Arya versus Gariadu. There's the other Zoe game I'm looking for. It was
the Ace versus Kassadin.
Ace versus Dasher. Ace versus Dasher. Like again, it's versus Kassadin, so caveat. But even so, he gets out of lane and ruins the top lane.
No. He actually roams on a pick that doesn't roam well. Like, no, Ace plays so well in week 6. Like, it's the first time I could genuinely feel like I could praise him and not have too many caveats. I'm like, wow, this guy's, like, legit, the double kill he got top lane, I was like, wow, this guy's really good. He's had a really good game. He just blew open the early game, and they fought around the map when Kassadin couldn't, and that was such an important thing for their team. V3, in that game in particular, showed me that, again, they are... The game versus CJ, I think it was a lot of draft diff. I think the rest of the games, when they had any semblance of an even draft, just crushed the games, and they look really, really good.
And Boogie, like once, also got to add Kha'Zix to his champion pool in his first game. And we've already talked a fair bit about the DFM V3 game, but he felt so comfortable on this champion amongst everything else that happened.
Boogie's so good. Boogie's so good.
Like, it was the first gank specific. Like, the thing is, Teamfight Kha'Zix is whatever. Yeah, like, it's
obviously.
kind of, it adds a certain amount of spice versus DFM because you can go invisible and jump in and come in from an angle that's not expected for the Galio, which is kind of nice. You can get the Galio in when DFM.
Kha'Zix Galio, KT Rolls to 2018. That's it.
So that's that aside, you know, actually, Kha'Zix's not a fantastic team fight unless you get super far ahead and could just blow people up, whatever. But what he did was he skirted the Scuttlecrap vision in the topside river to get into the Baron pit, hopped over the wall so he got past the web vision, then gets past to blow the Sanguine Pool, they dive the Vladimir under turret and kill him. Ebby tilts to a 90-degree angle after that. Like, it's bad. And like, to the point where the Vladimir ends 1-7, and part of that is just Boogie.
You're almost 1-8. He was at 100 HP at the end on the fountain, I believe.
Oh, yeah. I thought he was dead again.
Yeah, it was bad. Let's talk about a topic that the three of us have talked a fair bit about around V3, as this was the game where they lost their streak. And we don't actually relatively have a problem with once they're in game. Because we think the problem is not in game. The players, if they get their correct picks,
mostly
they can probably have a very interesting game, maybe even, and repeat their performance that they had against CGA last time.
Let me stress, the draft versus CGA should not have been competitive. V3 had no way to fight in the early game. Very, very telegraphed, and they should have lost that game straight out.
Yes.
Somehow they make it competitive. The first game
that shows how good V3 are.
It shows how good they are, because so you have a Mordekaiser into Renekton top lane. That is a 0cc lane into a hypermobile Renekton with Slice and Dice. Nidalee can't do anything there. You have a Jace into a LeBlanc. Hypermobile mid laner, no CC once again. Nidalee can't do anything there. You are left with a Kalista and a Thresh bot lane, which potentially can do something in the early game, and that is it. But when there is only one lane, you can gank very, very telegraphed. Graves is a power farm jungler, so is Nidalee. They tend to be around the map at the same kind of timescale. Boogie managed to get to bot lane 4 seconds quicker than Unica and gets a kill because Rhina flashed forward with a flash flay onto Gango's Jhin.
Good.
And with like literally the 4 seconds in the game where V3 could make the early game competitive, they managed to pull it off. 4-second window where V3 had a chance to do anything early game, they do it. And that is absurd to me.
And this is also trying to gank a set lane, which in all seriousness really might be one of the hardest lanes at the moment to gank.
A lot of CC, a lot of shielding specifically. You have no way to kill him before
you have no way to reposition your Jhin, and that's kind of I guess it's an issue. You're not a Tahm Kench or a Thresh to really save your AD carry. And
or CJ's a Bard where you kind of get to stuns and responses and all that.
You could try and put down CJ's bot lane for pushing up in the early game, but they thought they were safe. It's not like
Unica was there.
Like Graves played slowly. Unica was heading bot lane.
He took an extra camp.
Literally there. He took I'm trying to remember if he took an extra camp, but anyway.
Yeah, he took an extra camp, I think. Yeah.
It was
something like that.
He decided to go for.
Yeah, but he turned up if he turned up 2 seconds earlier, they would have killed Archer. And it would have been a 1-for-1 and nothing would have happened bot lane. For V3 to make it competitive in the early game, for me, it's actually astounding. So for me, even though they lost, they still look like the best team in the league, guys. Like, they genuinely do. It's sad that they lose their win streak, but if they sort out that draft, that is, they're so good.
Yeah,
so good.
They are I completely agree with Nymaera. I think he's probably nailed that on the head. What I will say is that draft versus CGA did raise a couple questions, because it was sort of like, okay, we've drafted double AP top side of the map. Ah, shit, we don't want to go triple AP top side.
If I remember our casting then Initia1ise, we were very concerned for V3's draft, and I'm almost in anguish and in pure duress. I feel like I'm getting tortured the second Ace locked in the Jace. I'm like, no.
Because we don't, because it's not like, there are some players out there that can make Jace in mid lane look absolutely monstrous. Like, I know Rookie likes Jace into LeBlanc. He absolutely ruins LeBlancs on that pick. Like, he can do it. It's definitely done. Ace isn't that player on this. And, I mean, I know me and Nymaera were having this conversation. We kind of had it on VOD review and then realized afterwards that Pantheon would have been a great pick in that mid lane, potentially. Yeah. If you wanted AD, you could have then dove bot even easier. You've got set up for the Nidalee. Like, it would have been so much better.
I mean, we've actually seen Pantheon Nidalee topside plenty of times before. It was a combo. And, it's pretty good into LeBlanc. You can stop a burst combo with your E, and you can also ult onto the backline, onto the Jhin, because once again, you don't have anything like a Thresh or a Tahm Kench to keep him safe. There are plenty of ways that picks works. We know that Ace has played that in the past. We saw it in summer 2019 playoffs. I don't care if he's not as good at it anymore. That pick would have been infinitely better than whatever the heck this Jace was. Jace did 2 good things that game. He landed 1 shot blast onto Arya alongside a Nidalee Spear to chunk him out to half HP before a fight, and he eat away a Haymaker 1 time.
But there's also the other problem that Paz Mordekaiser, me and Nymaera before the podcast, we came over about 5 different champions that were open to Paz that we believe he can play or should be able to play at least. That were great, and the Mordekaiser doesn't fix any of that. Yes, the Mordekaiser ult does help in team fights.
You know what? This would have been a perfect game for GP Rumble. You know that Ace plays it.
I mean, I also have
Rumble's really good onto Jhin. Like, he's really good into Jhin.
It's like, it's if you bot ult on ulting Jhin, he stops the ult. If you Rumble GP ult him, the fucker dies.
I mean, if he's gone.
That is flame broiled with lead shot in. Like, that's great on a barbecue, is what
there
you
are
have
so
there.
many picks they could have chosen, but those 2 solo lane picks in B4.
I mean, I've also made it very known that I dislike Boogie picking up the jungler there. I really don't like the Nidalee B-side 3. I think Boogie has the largest champion pool out of any jungler. He is the most flexible jungler, and if you have the best jungler in the region, you can basically prioritize everybody else. Ace is Galio, which he has a 5-0 win rate currently on in just this split alone.
And it crutches his lane versus Arya.
It does, and it means, yes, okay, we're putting Ace on a crutch champion, but guess what? That's a crutch champion.
Okay.
He's not.
That's fine.
He doesn't.
That's fine.
We did that last time on the Karma. Do it again on the Galio, and then suddenly you're like, okay, we don't have to worry about Ace. Ace will also play Galio, maybe like higher than most other mid laners, also because he's just got so much experience on this champion.
Yeah, no, the guy's a good Galio. The guy's fine.
And he's a very good Galio.
There's also no guarantee that because now you've got Boogie and Paz still to pick against, there's not a good chance with 2 bans that they're going to ban that Nidalee. And if they do, you still have so much else to play.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 1-game sample size.
That's a whole nother difference, yeah. Oh,
yeah. It's a 1-game sample size, and that's always an nice question. But it was also that thing is like, okay, if that's what Ace went to at that point, Fifth, there are some questions about, okay, Paz, Ace, what are your champion pools like, and why did it end up there? Again, it might just be draft difference, but there are just these other things in there where you go, maybe that's a potential weakness. But again, we're picking at straws a little bit here after
we are. In-game, V3 is still the best team in the league. Yeah. Out of game, there are some things that can be exploited, but it seems like them digging their own grave rather than other people putting them into it. Yes. I do think that versus DFM, V3 had some issues themselves. Like they blue side banned Karma, and they were very heavily showing their hand as towards dive conf, to which DFM could have countered.
Yep.
But like V3 is still playing immaculately in game for the most part. They'll still be playoff favorites coming into playoffs. Like there's no doubt. Unless something really bad happens.
And I mean, their last week is also a pretty chill week for them, but it's also a good week for them. They get to play against Sengoku, who look like they're a little bit out of sorts in a moment, and then they get to play against a team that we've all got a lot of hopes for.
Excited for that.
And in all fairness, looking at how it all goes, I think it might actually be my personal game of the week.
Mine. Yeah, I think if we take that vote now, I think it's V3 Burning
because I don't think CGA Sengoku is actually going to be anywhere near as exciting as I think it could be.
Or even CGA DFM, I think that should be a whitewash for CGA.
Yeah, and I think the other game I'm interested in, hilariously, is the last game, Burning Core versus the Hawks.
Yeah.
I actually think Burning Core Hawks might be mine.
That's fair.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I think that will be the most competitive game. Yeah. Burning Core versus V3 will be a big breaking point.
I hope Burning Core step up. I really do.
I hope that I hope the Hawks give us a 3-way tie. We have to have like 2 players.
Oh, that'd be beautiful. Oh man,
I'd be so happy.
2 tiebreaker games, and somehow it knocks down DFM to like 6th.
Oh,
it could well. I wouldn't even be entirely surprised.
No, I mean,
I refuse to believe it'll happen until it happens, because like nameplates off, DFM are crap. Nameplates on, there is this weight of
they're still crap, but they have nameplates.
Yeah, exactly. but those nameplates come with a certain amount of like, oh, those guys are supposed to be quite good, yeah. Recent play aside, but we'll see.
And that's it. Our thoughts are for Axis. A little bit too late, but I mean, at least they've found something at the very end of the week, and Super Week, they looked pretty strong. Rascal Jesters, we're not surprised. They've got 2 subs. They're still not working out for them. The Hawks, you know what? With what we just were saying about them, there's hope for them, and we're excited to keep seeing them play. DFM, well, it's been a struggle, and it's not going brilliantly, but you never can count out DFM, especially moving forward, and as they've got that playoff locked, DFM playoffs is something we're still never going to count out. Burning Core? Alright, they're on now, and they could be
so exciting,
really scary. Sengoku? Bit uneven, but we're going to reserve a lot of our full thoughts on them till we actually get to see week 7, because I think we'll need to see a bit more from them to make concrete. But we did flame them a fair bit. They should have had a perfect week. We're disappointed. There's still more to go through. CGA, well, we figured out a way to beat them, but in all fairness, they still continue to fight against everybody, and they still, and they also.
I know, it's great.
They also
Mechanics, the movie, like that's all they are right now. It's like we will win the lane, or like we will have Gango win the lane, and Arya will come up with the win the lane. We will go behind and goal, but we will team fight, and all we will do is team fight.
But so Arya, maybe I could play the Sylas now. Oh, Unica, back to Graves.
You now know your place, Unica, and you're doing better than what Yoshi did.
You'd best thank yourself that Rex size not matter.
Yes, or Yoshi would be back in and you would be out, sir. And let's be
all they are is like the D&D barbarian. Like they have no skills, no social abilities, no way to get out of it. What they will do is swing an axe real hard.
My Twitch stream, I actually played basically a warrior barbarian for Dragon Age, and that's all I did. It was, the nickname was Lexi Smash, and Lexi Smash, CGA Smash. The three are top team. They're the best team, and in all seriousness, they lost one game. Yeah. They lost the streak. They're still looking fire.
One loss does not make them a middle tier team. They even in their loss, like we said, just go back to what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. They're really, really good.
Gentlemen, with that quick recap done, with us also doing our full Super Week recap, which obviously was going to take longer because it was week 5 and week 6 for us. I think it's about time we move over to our players of the week. Now, I'm going to ask you now. We can edit this. I'm more than happy to. Would you like to take a break?
I'm okay if you want to keep going.
I think I'm okay unless you want to go straight off.
No, I'm good to go. I just
want
to.
I just think I want to get it done.
Do you want to like say like both weeks for the role at the same time? So like my top play in week 5, my top play in week 6 at the same time instead of going through both weeks, or do you want to split them out?
No, I've got huge different reasons for each of mine, so I can't sadly combine mine.
No, not as in like combine them, but like say them at the same time and then go through like a week 5.
I just think we might be having a huge conversation. I think we could. I'll be really strict on how we're going to recap this, by the way.
Okay,
sure. No
follow your rules, dude. Let's do this.
All right, so as always, I get to start us in the top lane, as that is not a role I play at all, but it's how we've done it, as we always like to try and give Initia1ise and Nymaera as our resident jungler and mid laner. Then standard roles. For my top laner of week 5, come on, there's no surprise here. I got to give it to Ray Farkey, boys! Ray Farkey back! Initia1ise, who is your top laner of the week?
Second verse, same as the first. Ray Farkey crushed it.
And Nymaera, who is your...
Wow, the old Renegade's top laner.
Ah, RF.
RF, yeah.
When shall we 3 meet again? Stop stealing my thunder, it's RF Ray Farkey.
Ooh, man, guys, he's so good, and this was a return to form. And in all seriousness, he wasn't really that far away in a few times from being the best.
He's never been straight ass. He's sometimes been half the ass, but he's never been the full ass. This time he has been like no ass at all. He's been all mojo.
He's been blessed with the fact that Camille's back in meta. Which is just big for that guy.
And he's making Darius work, which is terrifying, thank you.
Well, ghost buffs, frankly, are really good for this guy.
Nimbus Cloak's getting nerfed to my hit playoffs.
Also, he hasn't played Darius since he did get those buffs way back for the jungle. All the way back then. He hasn't actually played Darius since those buffs came in. That might be also helping him a little bit.
Darius is also really good versus Volibear, because Volibear goes into base contact and Darius just kills him.
True damages him. Yeah.
He's like, I don't care.
Oh, he's just got loads of % HP damage and just like Volibear doesn't kill him quick enough for him to get like Darius will get 2 Qs in the space of a Volibear kill combo onto him, and if he gets onto 2, even in a 1v2 top lane, he can just like ult both of them, probably kill him.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Aside from Malawi, he's probably the best 1vx champion out in top lane. Probably.
Burning Court also did go 2-0 in week 5, so we're not too surprised that they also did get that. Congratulations to Ray Farkey. Well done. Finally get a point on the map, and you get it across all of us. Initia1ise, sir.
I don't think this will be a surprise.
Your jungler of the week?
I'm going to say this once and only once. I won't say the word because you exactly got it. Yeah, that guy absolutely obliterated on Kha'Zix. Like it was. Oh,
wait. Let's brutal. Let's do the rest of us before you go. You get your place to speak. Truly, Nymaera, who is your jungler?
Oogie.
Fair. I sided with Initia1ise. I also gave it to once as well. Sadly, Initia1ise, you won't get a chance to talk as Nymaera first gets the floor.
That's why you should hold your tongue, sir, lest it be bitten off. So Boogie had possibly the most impactful early game ganks I have seen pretty much the entirety of the LJL. His early part of the game, even on his like the Kha'Zix versus Vladimir, he's just game changing. So I watched over a couple of Once's games as well. I feel like he did get caught a little bit in team fights, which was kind of what, even though his stats are really, really good, don't get me wrong. I think that Boogie, even though he did lose against CGA in this week, he did far, far more than the draft could ever have presented him with. He is just such a stunning player when it comes to figuring out what he can actually do in a game and then going beyond it. The guy's just nuts. Once did, of course, have some very flattering stats this week and carried his team to 2 wins, but Boogie, for me, he does stuff which none of the other junglers in the LJL does, so he's my MVP.
Initialize.
I'll agree with specifically against the Jesters, the fact he got caught by the Nautilus hook
Nautilus
around
a couple
the
of
first...
times.
Well, no, only the once that really mattered. And that was no, he's only died once
in both games.
He only died once games, so yeah, he didn't.
Okay, right.
So like yeah,
he only dies once.
Yeah. And the only time he died specifically versus the Jesters was basically when Burning Core were trying to contest around the dragon, and they don't really have the base sort of like face tankers, if you know what I mean, to walk up in that 5v5 space, because it's like Camille, Kha'Zix, LeBlanc, Ashe, Bard. So like it's kind of him, and he had to try and look for a space to come in and steal the dragon. And Nagi turns it around and gets the hook, and that was good news from him. But apart from that, I think once played in the enemy jungle super well. He put Hachimecha and Hoglet
for once. Like,
yeah.
Let's be real.
He did early on, and then he missed some dread signs that pulled him really out of position into
and then
the middle of the
died.
enemy team, and then died. So like, started okay, and then messed up. But like, it was sort of like Cog got out to a pretty good early lead versus Ray Farkey on the Jace versus Camille, because of a really good teleport from Cog that made that Ray Farkey was in a really tricky position. Once then basically put Cog never was allowed to play the game again properly, because once found him in the enemy jungle in the top lane, forced flashes, killed him solo, did it versus Pink. Like, it was just really good reactionary play to kind of shut down win conditions before they ran out of control in both games, which was really impressive. Did it to Gariaru as well. Like, the Azir was never safe to all.
Yeah. I mean,
I want to say Boogie did that to Steel and Saros in mid lane.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, in all seriousness, once played phenomenally. He really kind of kept it for his team in these 2 games. I mean, they were also versus the bottom 2 teams as well, so that is a caveat, which I also did think about for both Ray Farkey and Once, but they still played phenomenally, and if anything, it's just fun to also see these 2 players play really well. Boogie was my honourable mention for me. He played phenomenally, and he was arguably, outside of Reiner and Archer in that bot lane, was the only person I thought actually had an impact against CGA, so it's pretty good, but that's where we're going to have to leave it, gentlemen. And specifically Nymaera, would you mind taking the lead for our mid laners?
I did commit my regular sin this week. It was Arya for me.
I will also be joining you on the sinning of Arya.
And
come and
cleanse yourself.
I need to go to confession. I know Arya as well. It's okay.
Right. I thought it'd be controversial, but I'm converting.
Oh god, how's it controversial?
Controversial. He crushed this week.
This week was really good. I think that the drafts really helped him, and as you were saying earlier, Arya didn't really get to do much against the Hawks, but he was still deathless the entire week. I will actually give him negative points for the V3 game, because the draft was so good for him that if he didn't do well, I would have been really quite disappointed. But him to get double, like 25 stack Magi's on the LeBlanc versus V3, the best team in the league, go deathless, and also like kill so many people on the back end of fights, he just played really well. He's really good, guys.
I mean, if you are the main reason you beat the top team in the league, you deserve some points.
You do. I mean, I think Unica helped a lot. Nap, obviously, Gango, and Grando. Like the whole team of CGA really.
Go watch my VOD review.
Yeah, exactly. Go watch his VOD review. I mean, we probably disagree on a few things, but that's the point.
For sure.
That's the point of all of it. And in all seriousness, CGA, specifically Arya, carried hard.
Really good.
And
really good.
Yeah, the Hawks game, as I already mentioned, he did less, almost half the damage, or just below, or like 2/3 of the damage that Dasher did. Doesn't matter. Gango carried that game, and Arya was still really important for picks. That's what you can't look for damage percentage. He picked Honey in 2 spots where he was like, "I'm gonna do this." No, lads, I'm already dead.
Nah.
And he also stole a few shuffles, which were really good, and set the team up. And then Gango gets to do the damage. Arya, phenomenal. He's truly phenomenal.
He's pretty good at games.
With that said, gentlemen, let's come over to the bot lane. And I have to give it to the man I was just gushing about while I was talking about Arya. It's Gango. He's my bot laner of the week. Initialize, who did you pick?
I'm not actually sure. It was Gango. Yeah, he was really good.
Nymaera?
We've all agreed. All agreed again. Gango is mine.
All right, so I'll continue gushing for a few moments longer. Gango's really good, guys. His Jhin was really, really good. Arya did a lot of the killing, but he went 9, 2, and 10 and into a Callista with the support there. And also, I mean, we have to just say he pretty much solo won the game against the Hawks. He just was so good on that.
He did solo win the game.
If he has a go button on an AD carry, he hammers that shit really hard, but he does it in really good situations. That's why I think actually if Kai'Sa comes back into meta, it'll really favor Gango. He's really good on that champion too.
Yeah,
as Dravian we know about. Particularly in that game versus V3, he was just his curtain calls probably the best we've seen in the LJL so far.
Yeah,
okay, they're not
really
perfect,
smart.
don't get me wrong, but there was one particular one where
Is it the one where he picked
the mid lane kill onto
play
Jace?
onto Ace in the mid lane.
Yeah,
Arya
really
jumps forward and
good.
so I remember I was VOD reviewing, just literally earlier today. I was like, oh, it's a chain landing. Oh, I guess that doesn't mean much. Wait, why's the W? Wait, why is there a curtain call? I'm like, oh, turns out that Gango is and Jhin is really good from following up on so many plays.
And
He used to play it back in KT.
Exactly, yeah. And for him to like get kills out of nowhere is something which is really important for CJ because they've always played well around getting
while
random
casting
picks.
it, I start flaming Ace, and I actually stop myself halfway through, and I go, actually,
That's really good, actually.
No, Gango did that, and then Sam's like,
Well, this is
good
the thing.
job, you
Well,
came back
I
and
was just-
actually saw the light.
Yeah. I was just there and I'm just like, oh, he doesn't I was like, oh, maybe he needs to play respectfully because like the Graves is about to hit level 6 and it's like, and then when the play comes over, he has vision on Graves and Graves is level 5. It's like, oh, okay, no, I guess it's not an issue. Then the W lands from Jhin after the chains. I'm like, oh, wow, this guy's just dead. I did not expect that. And as someone, because, you know, I mean, I play a lot of Assassin mids. Basically trying to calculate kill combos is my thing. And for me to not calculate that, I'm just like, wow, okay, Ace, I can't blame you for that.
No.
Okay, yeah. I think it's also quite important in that after Gango got put down a little bit earlier on because of the early gank that we kind of, Nymaera called out earlier as well, with actually Boogie coming in and making things difficult. The fact that Gango managed to find a really clutch roam and then look for that thing, it's something we've seen when this guy is kind of on it and doing a little bit of playmaking. He's done this on Ashe before as well. That's why I think Ashe is a really good champion for him. Because if you remember, when they got the win over DFM the first time, it was Gango throwing an arrow from downtown out of vision that basically stopped Trundle getting out of the pit that allowed CJ to kill the jungler and turn around what was a really clever Baron attempt by DFM. You know, trying to use the Heimerdinger turrets and stuff, if you remember.
He did.
And I think that, you know, he had one game where he got 51% of the damage and ran over bot lane. Great, just sort of hard carry through lane. That second game was just smart map play and good playmaking to sort of...
It was murder, she wrote, and in all fairness, he totally deserved it. Gentlemen, that was my bot laner. Initia1ise, who is your support player?
No, Proud, just amazing.
Yeah. Nymaera, who is your support? You got
Proud also.
Well, we all know what I'm thinking. We all know the player I can't get enough of at the moment. I agreed with you. Initia1ise, you have the floor for Proud.
So Proud this week, I believe, or that week played 2 games of Bard, both of which were pretty damn awesome. He helped blow the flash on. Actually, that's right. That was week 6. We won't go to that one.
No, week 5. Week 5.
So,
he also did play 2 games of Bard that week.
Yep. So I mean, like, effectively, he was hitting some exceptional tempered fates onto Art and the likes to make things really, really tricky. He was roaming around very, very well. Just very, very clean Bard play. Like, best Bard in the league for me, I think, right now.
I think there's at least an argument there, right?
I think NT and Gang have both had some good games. I think Gang had that bit of a whiffed one versus V3.
True.
So then I'm like, earlier in the split, I would have said Gang. Potentially, I'd say NT after his really good games, but...
Yeah.
Oh, NT's had some really good ones. It's between Proud and NT for me, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, he landed some really important ults that basically denied Axis ever coming into the game. And then also, it was kind of the really important ones versus Rascal Jester, which was a messy team fighting game sometimes. Proud just, like, denied that and just put Pink or Art, normally Art actually a lot of the time, into that Zonya mode, and then just were like, their old team were like, guys, you ready? Ready? We get to do the moment where we all do it at once. And Yu-Gi-Oh loved that as well at once, and Proud just really supported his team, right?
Yep.
With that said, Nymaera, your opportunity to announce who your overall MVP for week 5 is.
Mine was Proud this week. For week 5, I put Proud.
Okie dokie. Well, for myself, actually, I picked Gango.
Fair, actually.
And initialize yourself?
I went with 1.
Ah, interesting. So we're all different. So Nymaera, as you have the floor first, as you announce it, you may begin. Why you picked Proud?
I was actually really close to picking Boogie, but the same reason I would have picked Boogie is the same reason I picked Proud. He adds an X factor to a team which you can't really plan against as the enemy team. You always know that something weird can happen when they're on the practice picks, and Proud this week, like, his Bard games were just nutty. There's very little you can do to plan against this guy if he's on form. He hit all the skill shots. He was very good at landing his Qs, landing his ults, everything. Like I said, multi-man Bard ults pretty much every game. So yeah, well deserving from me.
For myself,
I mean,
Gango truly dismantled, personally, the 2 games that he did get to play. He was just all over the place. He partly, I think, won the game versus V3 in a lot of spots on that Jhin, that roam that we've talked to death about. Hugely important, as well as just basically putting the Hawks in the ground for me. It's kind of why I also think they played against some of the harder teams at the moment, and I think he had a really good performance. So that's why I gave it to Gango. And for yourself, Initialize?
I think versus the Jesters, he was the primary reason they won that game, especially after things looked a bit dire, after a couple kills went the wrong way versus Burning Core, and his ability to bring it back around was hugely instrumental into making Rayfark out of the game, and like taking over the enemy jungle to kind of break apart how the Jesters play the map. And then versus Axis, it was... frankly, it was just really good work versus Galliardo on day 1 to kind of prevent them doing anything in team fights. And I would have mentioned Uinyan, but Uinyan just had a bad game, so I didn't want to call him out because he just didn't play that.
Yeah, and that's all fair. Now, gentlemen, we now must move on to week 6. And And in all seriousness, this note for our listeners, which will be interesting, is V3 were the only team to go 2-0. But it wasn't as straightforward as that, as they also did play the bottom 2 teams. So we have to look at it with a bit of our glasses, tinted glasses on, and with a grain of salt, because we can't look at this with Magical Christmas Land in mind. But let's start out with the top laner for week 6 MVP for myself. I know I just said everything there, but I'm still giving it to Paz. Initialize yourself?
Yeah, I went with Paz as well.
Okay, Nymaera?
Oh, Rayfarky.
Okay, you have the floor first then, Nymaera.
I think that Rayfarky was made to look pretty bad versus Sengoku. He was playing against Renekton and Nidalee and somehow managed to survive so much early pressure in a way that basically most top laners would not be able to do. I think that his 1vx scenarios were really, really impressive. Even though he was set behind on the Camille, he ended up doing a lot of stuff in team fights, which I didn't expect him to do. And then versus DFM, his Gangplank came back out, and he was a force to be reckoned with. He was definitely changing the way the team fights were being played with his ultimate and his barrels. I think that he was just a hugely impactful top laner. Even in that losing game versus Sengoku, there are a lot of plus points for me to give to him from that game, particularly because he could have absolutely capitulated, and of course he didn't.
I mean, I need to make a quick correction here. V3 Esports didn't play Axis. They actually played the Hawks and Rascal Jester. So, quick correction for me. The reason I gave it to Paz is he basically shut down Aramik. I knew he did. I knew he did this versus someone. He got the karma. We were like, ooh, this could be an Ace flex pick. This could be a Reina flex pick. No, it's Paz. And then he brings out this champion, basically just says, Aramik, you don't get to play. And denied Tussle from ever ganking top as well. And it really helped. And then he had a beautiful Camille game, by the way.
Yeah, his Camille game was great.
But it was also against Rascal Jester. But it's against Cog, so that's a legitimate top laner as well.
Well, like, for me, the reason I think is part of it, so the Aramik game was actually like, that was basically where the Hawks looked to go. I mean, they didn't have a fantastic... They had, like, 2 losing lanes, so there was already issues there in terms of, like, the Wukong and the Caston were always going to see pressure versus, like, the Karma and Zoe of all things. But, you know, Tussle had a fantastic Lee Sin game the other day. He comes in and Paz runs circles around Aramik, and Tussle has a really good game on that Karma to prevent anything happening. Ace roams up and gets his double. Been over that before. And the Camille game really impressed me, if only because literally the day before that, Cog had a very good game versus Rayfarky's Camille. And had played that super well.
Sure.
This time around, Paz kind of outplays Cog. So I was like, good stuff.
Fair. And I mean, fair for Rayfarki, actually. I didn't look hugely into his stats, as I was pretty disappointed personally with how he played the Sengoku game. But I think your points, actually, Nymaera, are pretty fair onto him.
I'm just like, how well do you expect someone playing against a Renekton Nidalee game to go? And then how well did Rayfarki do? It could have been so much worse.
It could have been.
So much worse.
Yeah. But then I also... But then... Oh, yeah. No, I think that's a fair point, actually. I didn't really appreciate
there was
that
a point where, there was a point where, he
that's
survived the 1v2, managed to go back in and trade out a load of HP, which actually forced a reset and return and saved his teleport. I'm like, hey, that's actually pretty good. You should not really be able to do that in that matchup.
He then also got to slap Ebby.
Yeah.
Which is a fair amount of brownie points if you're me.
Yes.
I mean, Boogie came to help, but even so, that was some slapping.
Even so.
Talking about junglers, let's actually move over to our jungler. Initia1ise, can you give me your jungler of the week for week 6?
Boogie. Can't really give it anywhere else.
Nymaera?
Mine was also Boogie.
Believe we're all in agreement. We are all in agreement. I also chose Boogie.
Wait, Unico, why?
I mean,
well, dude, I just licked the weirdest looking toad I've ever seen, and
I mean, the reason I'll say it was Boogie here as well was the Sylas game versus Hatchamecha was so
good,
smart.
You shouldn't be able to do things that he did in the early game. How does he do it?
So I mean, basically, Volleybell likes full clear. He can get in it, and Paz basically read where Hatchamecha was starting, then goes 3 camps, and then double scuttles. He gets 2 scuttle crabs against the Volibear early when he's got, Jason Lulu shoving in. He should have all the priority ever over the top side of that map. And the fact that he manages to get away with murder and get the 2 scuttle crabs and then find early ganks as well. Just great early play out of Sylas and Boogie there.
Yeah. Nymaera?
Oh, yeah, pretty much the same thing. You should not be able to do what he did on Sylas in the early game. Sylas jungle has been not played for a long time for a good reason. The guy's just not very healthy on his first clear, has a lot of issues trying to have very efficient ganks, but then basically once again he teams up with Reiner, and these two make plays happen that shouldn't really happen, and yet they do. They do it consistently. That's very scary, and then he goes off into the mid game and the late game, building an off-tank Sylas from the jungle, and it does so well. Just does so well. He builds a Spirit Visage and he's unkillable.
And then also, the other game against the Hawks, he then has over half the kills.
Yes.
Just has over half the kills, and he has the most amount of kill participation. Well, actually tying. Well, actually no, he doesn't. He's actually second tied. But I mean, that's crazy that he's just all over the place, right?
Yeah, no, his Graves game, once again, just following up with his ults, making sure that the Lee can never do anything. Ever.
Well, hard counter jungled the Lee.
Yeah, he's the guy. Oh, yeah, he just knows his exact limits of what he can get away with in terms of jungling and counter jungling, and he plays to them pretty well every game.
He did indeed. Now, let's move down to the mid lane. Nymaera, who is your mid laner of the week?
You guys are gonna think me very strange for this, but for me, it's Ace. Ace is my mid lane MVP. He's earned it from me. He's had to work hard, but he's done it.
It's still not enough for me. It's still Arya for me.
Oh, what?
Yeah, still Arya.
How the tables have turned.
Still
No.
Yeah, still Arya.
I'm actually Ace as well.
That wasn't even hard for me to pick Arya this week as well. This was actually a spot. Yeah, he played Akali, right? Against a comp which is anti-Akali, and he can still carry a fucking game. And he was the only good player when they lost against Axis. He was the only player who looked like they could really look outside of Unica, who had a great early game, in all fairness to him. Arya can just beat anyone with apparently a sandwich from 2 days ago and an old packet of crisps that's gone very stale and a can of Coke that's now just water.
That was your first mistake. It's gone stale, so it's slightly harder, and it's therefore a better melee weapon.
Apparently, because when you're on Akali, you have to go into the middle and start smacking everybody over the head. And
that is actually fair.
That's why
I took some points off for the Akali games. I'm like, he got really fed and then entered a couple of team fights. And I'm like, actually,
it's quite hard.
He played the early game really well, and then the last couple of fights, he did just shit on people.
Yeah, and that's why I had to give it to him. And yes, they lost against Axis, but this is a renewed Axis in all fairness. And he also didn't die, and he wasn't the reason they lost He was not the reason they lost. He didn't even get picked out like we sometimes go, oh, well, Arya on Silas, Rascal Jester, lol, 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 Blitzcrank. It's not even that. He did everything he could, and he didn't get there. But now I will stop gushing about Arya, for once, apparently. And, gentlemen, tell me about Ace, the man that I would normally pick MVP for. Go on, do it.
So, the Zoe game was really legit. He manages the double kill he gets top was mechanically so good. He threads the Zoe bubble through the wall, reading the ward hop of Lee Sin, who then flashes. He manages to slide the paddle star past the invisible Wukong to get one, then manages to portal forward to kind of geometry a second paddle star to catch the Wukong as well. And then from that point, he roams around. He puts out fantastic damage. He is forever ahead of Dasher.
It's the best. It's the best roaming Zoe game we've seen in the LJL, and it is in a game versus a Kassadin, which means that you do have it's quite a lenient lane for doing that. But it's also very important to get all that you can out of that period of time where you can fight against the Kassadin. And a small hint. Kassadin didn't get to fight the entire game because it was fucking over. They killed everyone. The Nexus was gone.
In 23 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's a really, really quick game, and a lot of it is off of Ace just snowballing the game. He had the highest kill participation in that game at 405. Ace legit in that game was very, very good for me.
And then his set was, again, it's against Pink, but he was up in CS by a significant margin versus Pink. Was involved in 20. Was involved in 22 of the kills.
To the roam. Every time, and every time he was somewhere, he was making the fights happen really, really well. No, his set game was arguably more impressive.
Really good. I agree. His set was beautiful.
And part of this is now he basically is, in the weirdest way to say this, he's Boogie's support.
Yeah.
In the same way that Unica is Arya's support, Ace is it's exactly the same.
It's the reverse way in the roles, but it works.
We'll think Niski and Blabber over for C9 in the LCS. Niski spends his time basically following up on whatever Blabber wants to do. Now, I think Niski is a better mechanical player, generally speaking, and if you want to play for his lane, he can do and just win the 1v1s. He's great at solo kills and that kind of thing too. Pantheon game, for example, versus Jensen. I think one time he just managed to get some beautiful kills that way. But that said, it's a similar playstyle where actually you just look to back up your ridiculous jungler who's going to go balls to the wall. Having a player like Ace who will come and support what you're doing is great news.
Yep, and Ace played really phenomenally that week, and in all fairness, I kind of was playing a little bit of devil's advocate as I thought you both go for Ace this week, so I was like, hey, I'm going to kick Arya here, and Nymaera won't pick Arya.
No, I'm just there like, someone will pick Arya, you know, he's still safe for like our MVP for the end of the split, so I don't need to do it this week. I'm good.
Let us talk about, gentlemen, our bot laner of the week, and for me, I picked Archer. Apparently I had an I, but it's Archer. Initialize first.
I went with Art.
Okay, and Nymaera?
I'm agreeing with Sam. I also went with Art.
Interesting. So
his Caitlyn game was really, really good.
In all fairness, it wasn't too bad. Now, I get the floor first, though, as I get to talk about Archer. And, okay, yes, I did.
There's a lot to say. He's great.
I did put the caveat very early on, saying, they were against some middle-of-the-pack team. He just stomped the Jesters. I mean, the whole team stomped the Jesters, and he piled on as hard as he could with a Callista landing like 2-man knockups, and then Reyna just going, oh, I'm here now? Alright, guys, Rana's here, and I'm just going to drop the box, I'm going to flay you, I'm going to hit you, and then Archer this whole time is just deleting. He secured, I think, more objectives than Boogie did, because Boogie was too busy killing people. It was absurd. And then his Ezreal game, he basically solo killed Honey, which was funny as F to see, and then he just ran over the map with the rest of his team. I really liked Archer this week, so that's why I gave him my MVP. Gentlemen, you both picked Art. Share this part of Art and why he was so good.
Doesn't matter if it goes 0-2, he still impacts the game in really large ways. The V3 game, wasn't so pretty, but Art really wasn't the issue, and he's probably the one guy that was the shining spark for Rascal Jester.
Yeah,
like a
he's got a couple turnaround kills.
0-7 solo laners and a jungler that's really struggling to make any impact. The big one for me was the CGA game, though. He played Caitlyn, he crushed lane, and more importantly, he crushed teamfights up until the very last one. He only had one death. And that one death was the one get death, which kind of ended up sealing the game. But like, it showed how much was on his back and how big his back was in that game that it had to come down to that.
Like, his mechanical prowess in that game was pretty sublime. I thought about Archer. He was my second V3 won twice. And like the first get, like, and again, the Callista game was really good. Don't get me wrong, but I was like, but then again, Art was kind of like there was a lot that went right for that game for V3 as well, aside from Archer.
Yeah, and also this is our own opinion at the end of the day, which must be said. I do favor people that win games. If people don't win games, I can't give it to them. Sometimes
I think the problem again, it's just against like Axis and Rascal Jester. So I'm like.
Yeah, that also does come into it a little bit, but in all fairness, he also did play really solidly against the
Hawks and Rascal Jester. By the way,
whereas Art did play against V3 and CGA. That's not going to be easy. Top 2.
Yeah. I guess for me it was
almost out team for the best team fighting team in the league.
Yeah,
which is really impressive. Yeah, and then and actually managed to get some turnaround kills in a game versus V3 where it was all falling apart really badly. So it's like, okay, one game, like 2 games where like you are doing, one game where it was like okay to good, and then the other game where it's like, hot damn, dude, you are so good. Just get this guy a team, please.
That's fair. That's fair. I've also noticed, because I have an assumption, but I first need Initia1ise. Who is your support of the week?
I spent a long time trying to work this one out.
This was hard for me.
Yeah, but I've gone with Gang.
Oh wow, okay. He was never in my contention. Okay, Nymaera rather. Who is your one?
Honestly, honorable mentions to Gang for the one game where everything was on his back, but then, but I have gone with Rhino, all things said and done.
Okay, I also went for Rhino, and I just went on pure stats at the end of it. I'm actually interested because Gang was never on my shortlist. I had 2 other supports on my shortlist, but I never had Gang on my shortlist. I'm interested in Initia1ise. Why is he your MVP of the week?
So I basically had the ones that were on my shortlist were Gang, Proud, and Rhino.
Support MVP of the week, right?
Yeah, support MVP. So and I was like, okay. So Rhino had a fantastic game for the Justice. So many double, triple flows, like great. And then the other game versus the Hawks, he's like, just didn't do anything. It was 0-0-3. It's like, it was okay. Like, just like non-impact one. So like, okay, whatever. So I thought, good game and Met game. And then Proud as well. It was a similar kind of deal where it was like, it was that really 50-50 thing. Whereas that one game, the Alistair game was fantastic. And then the other game was bad. Yes. It was not pretty versus Sengoku Gaming. Like, his thresh was kind of slapped a bit.
So Gang.
Yeah, so Gang. Specifically versus Axis, like he hard won that lane for DFM early on. He managed to output Corporal very, very low. Sure. He then at that point him and Utapon really win that lane and put the kind of one of the really big win conditions for Axis, the Kaiser. Yeah, they did. They killed it.
Yeah,
they got first blood down there.
They actually 2v2'd away Axis' win condition, which is Kaiser being relevant in the game.
Yep.
And then a lot of that is just Gang being fucking good at set.
Yeah. And then he also does a fantastic roam with Steel that was really well timed to be there for the dive against Ebby in the top side. Like, even if they pulled away from the dive, they would have still been there to kind of contest that tower push. Really good. He catches Gariaru in mid, which was like breaking the stalemate because DFM were kind of waiting around for Infernal Drake. Like, okay, we need to get something so we can kind of like move over to Infernal Drake with advantage. He does that. He steals away the Elder Drake, but also by like having more damage. Like, he does 2,000 damage to the Elder Drake, whereas the smites combined from the spellbook Gariaru, the spellbook on Zoe and Hoglet was like 1,800.
If you don't mind, could you start talking about the other game that Gang played? Because you've just gushed about Axis, and I'm like, are you just basing it on one game out of interest or not?
So that was the main game. I think that's really good. And then basically Utapon and Gang versus Yuhi and Proud. Like, Gang actually had a fairly decent tower game. It was a passable game. It wasn't anything winning, but like the dive around the top tier 2, where they go and they use the Cosmic Radiance really well to change out the turnaround, was pretty big. They play the lane pretty well as well. They get the 2v2 kill down there. Like, that kind of thing's pretty good. The rest of the mid game was fantastic.
Yeah, he was probably the best member of DFM in that game, in all fairness, because I remember when they run down, they're on when is it? Because he's the one that had the Cosmic Violence. Yeah, it was with Utapau and Steel, and they almost turn it around that team fight, and they do, and then they start to go. The rest of the Burning Core have to run away, and it's like, can DFM maybe come back into this if Gang keeps landing like 3 or 4 man Cosmic like Radiance? It's
Cosmic Radiance, but like he does a pretty good job of like bringing around like a big advantage. Yeah.
But sadly, it was not meant to be. Nymaera,
nope.
We both went for Rhina.
Yeah.
Why did you go for Rhina?
Yeah, I have to say, I do want to say I almost did go for Gang, but then the turret game kind of put me off a bit. I thought his set game was really good, but then Rhina's just really consistent. I mean, it doesn't matter what game he's put into, he always performs. We've not had a single game where he's been bad this split. We've not had a single game where he's actually been anything less than great, honestly. As just continuing in form. I think that mainly the reason I voted for him this week is because there was such a lack of consistency out of all the rest of the supports. I think that Gang was maybe the closest, but even then, it wasn't. Again, there was that one great game and one Met game, and I think that Rhina had 2 good games to great games. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I mean, everyone went 1-1. V3, the only team that went 2-0, and Rascal Jesters went 0-2. So it is going.
Yeah, and you've already said that you do favor the players which actually lead to their team getting the wins.
Yeah,
if they win, then that's a bonus point to them. That's very obvious.
Yeah, exactly. And they had 2 very quick games, and like sadly, that was the other thing you have with V3 for me. They 23 minutes one game, 26 minutes, right? Nymaera, that's just super quick.
It is. It is. And sometimes it's really hard to make yourself look good when everyone else has carried the game, but it's not like Rhino was ever a weak point.
No.
Like,
yeah. It's like, I guess the thing versus the Hawks is like, okay, well, Rhino just like, he just didn't need to be involved, so it was just kind of like, he was a bit of a non-factor in that one. Like, he didn't play badly, but he didn't need to be involved because the top side of the map just disappeared.
Yeah, exactly.
So I kind of was like, okay, more of an impact and more was Gang for me. But the thing is, I was like inches from Rhino because his Thresh game was sublime.
It really was.
Those plays, man.
Nymaera, would you mind doing me the pleasure of announcing who your overall for week 6 is your MVP?
I actually went with Ace.
Okie dokie.
I went with Ace. I was really impressed with him. I mean, I gave my reasoning earlier, but we'll go later.
I ended up giving it to Boogie this week.
Fair.
Initia1ise?
I went with Ace as well.
So all V3 players, I'm in the minority, and for once I'm in the minority talking about Boogie. Okay.
I know, right?
How do I say this? Boogie really good, only die 2 times, have KDA better than everybody in league. How's that, guys? How's that? He's got a...
Pretty good.
It got the message across.
The next 3 players in KDA is actually Ace, and then it's 2 other members. It goes, I think it's Archer, then Rhina. Rhina's now 4th best. Baz isn't in the top. Baz sadly isn't in the top 5 yet. I think he's 6th or 7th. But yeah, that's just saying it. Go on, talk about Ace, because I mean, Boogie very good.
We talked about him earlier, both of us did. He snowballed a game versus a casting which needed to be snowballed. He knew the win conditions and mechanically played it better than I've ever seen him play on stage. He's really, really good at that. Then remind myself of his other game because that was the Zoe game.
It was the set game.
Go through the set. Oh yeah, and the set game again. I'm just like, he's probably the best roaming mid right now on form. And part of that is helped by the structure of his team, but he's always getting the first roam. He's not losing as much as he was in terms of CS previously. Sometimes he'd end up losing a lot of farm for that. Everything's working out for him, and this week in particular, he made everything work.
Fair. Initia1ise, anything to add on top?
Again, I was tossing up between Boogie and Ace.
Okay.
So again, I basically went, okay. So Boogie's Silas game was phenomenal, but it was joined by a phenomenal performance by Ace's.
Well, they're a whole team, really.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, well, yeah. But like those 2 players were the ones I thought really were the crux of why they won that game. So, okay, so that's kind of 1-1. And then I went for the other game, and I thought, actually, Ace was the real reason they won that game. Boogie was good, and he was there and got loads of kills and did well. But actually, the reason they won was kind of Ace getting out of lane, destroying that top side, and snowballing from there. So I was like, okay, I give that one to Ace over Boogie.
You can also just say he didn't die. Boogie died. Yeah. Ace didn't die.
Yeah.
Wrecked it. He wrecked it.
So he just didn't die. Yeah, exactly. So it's like deathless week. Fantastic KDA was involved in a lot. We had a higher kill participation than Boogie in that last game as well. Like, so I went, okay, it's pretty close. I'm giving it to Ace off great mechanics, better KDA, arguably 2 carry performances versus like 1.5 for Boogie.
Fair enough. And now, gentlemen, the most important part of all of this. Nymaera requested that we went to him first because he didn't quite know at the time before recording this. What we're going to do is...
Yeah, I don't want to be influenced by you guys.
Yeah.
I'm making my own decision.
We are going to do our overall MVP for Super Week. Now, this obviously can be a player that we have mentioned in either one of our overall or maybe in respective role, or someone completely different we haven't even mentioned yet. We just thought they didn't quite have it, but if we're counting both weeks, they come into it. Nymaera, who is going to be your overall MVP for Super Week?
Okay, I had a short list of 3 players.
Okay.
And this 4th player who I've actually chosen was not part of those 3.
Okay.
Of course it wasn't.
I am actually going to give it to Arya.
Of course you are.
I am. I'll tell you who my shortlist is after you guys have talked about it. But yeah, for me, Arya, 4 really, really good games.
Okie dokie. Initia1ise, if you would like to share with the class.
I've gone with Proud. I think he put on the best.
Oh, wait. Shh. You're only meant to say the player's name.
Alex went and said some more too. Don't do this to me.
He hinted that we've got more content from him. That's all I'm going with. And also, I'm joining you. So he's minority as well.
Okay.
So he has to also kind of go first. Proud is also my MVP. I didn't put him as my support, but yeah.
He was on my shortlist alongside Boogie and Ray Farkey. Those were the 3 players I was considering. I think that all of them had so much pulling power for their team just to get them across the finish line. But honestly, just looking at how Arya succeeds in games where he has no right to, it was in a similar way to Boogie when I was talking about his Nidalee and also talking about that Kha'Zix. Like, sometimes he does shit, like these 2 players do shit, which this shouldn't realistically be able to do. Very close to giving it to Boogie for the Silas and the Nidalee games, because honestly, how do they manage to do that stuff? But for Arya to do that, like, 4 games, that's just nuts. This guy is so consistent at being the utterly ridiculous carry. How many times did he even die? I mean, he had a couple of deaths on the Akali game, but I think his other 3 games were deathless. Like, it's something ridiculous like that. The guy's really, really hard to remove.
I mean, he didn't die in one of the 2 weeks.
He didn't die in 3 out of the 4 games. The Akali game, he got 5 deaths, but he also got 10 kills, so we'll let him off.
And also hard carried a game versus a team combat you're not meant to be good against.
Yeah, exactly. Give him whatever. He does really well. So yeah, my MVPs I got Arya, all memes aside.
Okay, now Initia1ise, we can start talking about Proud.
Yeah.
Now we can start doing it.
We've mentioned the Bard games. They were pretty bloody phenomenal, but the one that pushed him over the edge for me was that Alistair game versus DFM, where his turnaround plays, his flash pulverized headbutts were just awesome. Really, really good.
And if I must say, this was the game that actually put DFM in very hot water for me.
Yeah,
because they were getting schooled every way, 3 ways till Sunday, and Proud made Gang look like a way lower support player in comparison to where I had him in my power rankings personally. Proud just destroyed Utapon and Gang. He just said no. Guys, I'm playing this game and you're going to play how I dictate it, and Yuhi, you're not dying. Bad Yuhi.
I mean, like, they lost lane, don't get me wrong, but like then the mid game came around and the plays that Proud were making were just great. Yeah. Really great. And I think there was one turnaround play in the bot side with some gangs as well. Like, just really, really good.
I mean, he did the absurd thing where, who was it on? It was on Utapon in that beautiful team fight where he hexa flashes forward, runs around... Hex Flash, sorry, thank you. Runs around Utapon while he's trying to jump, but he can't jump backwards because of how it's set up in the team fight. Runs around, pulverizes him in, runs around, then headbutts him into the whole team, and it's just like, well, you just won the whole fight off your own back, mate. All right, fine.
Or it's just sort of like the kind of like he'll do like he'll look like he's walking away and then just flash with the heel turn to come right back at you. It's like
the thing for me is that it's really easy to look bad on Alistair, and it's actually kind of hard to look that good. He has the tools to do so. There is the upper end, but like if you fuck up on Alistair, it's so bad.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
like,
for him to have a game like that, really, really impressive.
Oh, it was.
I mean, there's a reason some like the supports that have made a name for themselves in the world are like the likes of Mata for Alistair, back when the RNG flank where he gets the 4-man pulverized versus double lift and knocks TSM out of groups in that big group of death. Like that kind of thing. Wolf's Alistair was really famous. SKT have a skin for it. You know, there's like the list goes on. Yellowstar was always great. Edward back for Gambit back when they were right.
But to reach,
all these things.
But yeah, I mean, Proud played phenomenally. Congratulations to him. He had 3 really stellar games and 1 game. But like even then, game, like the meh game, was still so good. If you compare it to the rest of the games that he had, it's just night and day different.
I think one thing that's really worth highlighting though is, I mean, as much as we told you about the upsets, if you go look at our prediction document, I think 5 of the games went across like almost unanimous predictions, something like that. Look at the players which we've shortlisted. I mean, there's Proud, that's won it for you guys, and then there's like Rayfarki in there as well. There are a lot of players being contended here, which we would not have even considered for Player of the Week most of the weeks this split.
That's fair.
What a week of changing fates.
Yeah, and that's
so crazy.
I think that's a really good takeaway from Super Week. There has been a lot of upsets, a lot of new faces. Well, not new faces, but players. Players
to the upper echelon.
Oh, 100%. Like, there's no Sengoku team here. There's no Sengoku here. There's only Arya from CGA, really a lot. A lot of this is more, okay, pandering partly to V3, because guess what? They are the number one best team.
You have to.
And part of that pandering is also to CGA, because guess what? They are also second place. They're really, really good. We then started talking about Burning Core, a middle-of-the-pack team, and we're just like, yeah, no, they're really, really good now.
They're legit.
And that's where we're at. Also, the Hawks definitely starting to step up, and
yeah, they are.
Where we're, and Axis, sadly, it's a little bit too late, but they're stepping up now. And
yeah.
Hey ho, let's go, gentlemen. I'm not going to dwell too much longer because we've been recording this podcast for a while, and we must get on to our questions so we can end out the rest of this podcast. Our first question comes from... Oh, God, don't make me try and...
El Maestro.
Thank you. He asked a great question we've tried to ignore a fair bit from ourselves, and we've tried not to talk about too much. But now the question has been asked to us. Will DFM win a playoff series?
Okay, let's break this down, because they are going to be in the first round of playoffs in the lower bracket. So that means their potential opponents are Sengoku, Burning Core, and the Hawks.
Yep.
Now, I guess it's... Okay, so do you want to go through and say, do we think they're going to win a series versus X Team? So, will DFM win a series versus Sengoku on current form?
Probably not, in my head.
I think it's...
Possible.
It's Sengoku favoured, but possible. Because Sengoku have also looked a bit meh, and it is a quite... But that being said, Sengoku have really just trashed DFM this split.
They really have.
Both games, they've just figured them out.
Yeah. Yep. So I don't know if I could give it to them versus Sengoku.
No, so I would say unlikely to win versus Sengoku. And remember, they lost the first best of 5 versus them in spring. They had the second chance to come back with a patch change and really try and change things that way. Okay, so Sengoku, I'd say unlikely not. Burning Core, do we think they beat them right now?
No, I think
room to play through bot.
But I mean, I give it. I'm more confident Burning Core beat DFM in a series than Sengoku personally. Like, Burning Core look dirty at the moment.
Given how Seros probably won't punish Yu-Gi-Oh as hard as they need to, and also Rayfarki is playing so well,
and Ebby is not.
And also the fact that Steel won't play Kha'Zix. Let's be honest, he's not going to. He's not going to play carry junglers, and I think he'll get bashed around by once. I think that Burning Core have... Again, I would probably favour it to Burning Core.
They've also got Proud at the moment.
I think that...
I will say Steel has pulled out the Graves finally and looked good on it. And he's, we know he plays Kinch, so I won't entirely write off a...
No, okay, but so if I'm giving it in percentages, it's like Sengoku, I'd say like 78% chance that they beat DFM. Like it's.
See, I'm giving them 65. I think Sengoku wins 65% through.
I'd say 70. I'd say 70 right now.
That's fair. But I'm giving like 75, 80% for Burning Core in my eyes personally.
Yeah,
I'm way higher on them.
75%.
Yeah.
So then you have to ask, okay, the Hawks. That's the last team remaining.
That's their best one.
So. But then, remember what I was saying earlier, the Hawks are not really a well-studied team, and they're on the up and up with this new coaching stuff.
Very
true. I think the DFM are really good when they get to scout out their opponent very well. I'm not sure they can do that with the Hawks having such a quick turnaround and showing such a lot of different stuff in such a short pace of time. There's not enough data there for DFM to really discover them. So I think that... And remember, the only way they can play them is by ending above Burning Core and Sengoku. They can't end up above Burning Core, and they have to pick up a win versus Burning Core. So they'd have to go 2-0 and Burning Core would go 0-2. That ain't happening for... Well, Burning Core could go 0-2, so they're facing V3 and the Hawks. But DFM are versus CJ and DFM. So I think that they probably won't even place the play against the Hawks. And even if they did, I think that Sengoku, if they end up winning, they probably choose the Hawks over Burning Core.
So I think here's my thoughts.
But the Hawks also have Ramone in the back room, which they can immediately pull out. That's the one thing I want to add on top
assuming
of that.
they still, yeah, it's always a possibility. I agree. I mean, so here's my thoughts. DFM. Like, I think Nymaera's really broken it down pretty well there. You've also got to remember that DFM went from 4-2 to 5-7. That is a 1-5 score in the last few weeks. That's pretty shit, frankly. There's not a lot of way of spinning that. That said, I will put DFM in kind of the same category as somebody like G2 or Fnatic at the minute in Europe, or TSM maybe in seasons past, SKT in seasons past. Like, if these guys reach playoffs, and I know like all the EU teams have basically said like, if G2 make playoffs, we'll still be afraid. Basically because this is a team that prepares super well, their players are really good, and they turn up when it matters. And nameplates off, I don't give DFM much. Nameplates on, I'll give them the edge, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lost anyway. Like, I'm going to say DFM will win because I've got to off the history, right? But then it's also like the thing was like, even if they lost, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I know Ender said it really well about...
Ever. They've never had less than 80% win rate in a regular split. They won't even get 50%.
Yeah, I know Ender said the same thing about G2 over in Europe, saying like I've got to give it to G2.
If I may, the big thing for me that I think really hammers my nail on the head why I'm so down on DFM at the moment, and it's something we mentioned on the podcast, which neither of you actually brought up yet, so I get to go. This was a break DFM. They came into Super Week after a fucking break, and then they look like this. This is they had the same amount of time to prepare that they did for that Super Week when they ended up destroying V3 and then demoralizing Sengoku. They had no new strategy. They are not playing this current meta, and they drafted kind of horribly in a lot, and they had 3 weeks to prepare. They didn't prepare. Are they going to prepare for Super Week like this? Because, I mean, if they're preparing for Super Week like this, playoffs, I've just got no hopes for them.
So, yeah. So that's just it. Nameplates off, no. Nameplates on, I'll give it to them, but like I won't be. But that's just also me saying like I won't be surprised if they do lose, because
the thing for me is that nameplates on, they actually have that weight of history working against them. You know, I don't.
Would you say the same for Fnatic G2?
Yes,
exactly. Yeah. So Sam, I think that if you're in a position to like
and TSM, that's why they've crumbled.
Yeah. Remember, like Sam, imagine having the pressure of playing with that history. And when you're
but
having
very rarely have these teams not performed in playoffs.
Sure, but now,
TSM.
but then imagine being the first people to do that and the first time to do that.
Sure,
And the thing for me is that like if it was something that was easily remedied, I'd agree with you. But like, there's so much going wrong with them. So much going wrong with them. It's not just it's the way they're playing around their draft. The game plan is.
And some of their players are falling apart a little bit, right?
Yeah, and a lot. I mean, like Ebby in particular playing.
Really
frankly, very poorly. Gang has had some very mixed performances, and they don't have this solid rock to play around anymore.
Out of interest,
the thing is, all of these I don't disagree with, guys. Like, I'm not like I'm very much with you, but it's just that thing was like I kind of like I can never count them out until they actually fail. Like until they're out of playoffs, I will never quite count them out.
1-5's a fail.
They haven't won a game versus a top tier team.
No.
The entire split.
But then
they've lost 0-2 to V3, 0-2 to Sengoku. They've lost against CJ as well. They might be able to pick up a 1-on-1 record versus them, and chances are they might do because CJ are a weird team. But like for them to not pick up a win against any of the top tier teams, of course we're asking will they win any playoff series? I still think the odds are against them. I would say no this time only. I would say no.
Well, the odds are against them according to our desk if we take majority, but there's always still a chance. And DFM are that team where Initia1ise can turn around at the end of it and go, well, like, I did kind of say this is the way they could do it, and I did kind of say I told you so here, lad. And
I have to go off my own. I have to go off my own analysis. You know, I have to trust my own knowledge of the game and knowledge of the team.
Yeah.
So that's the way. I mean,
I'm just trying to round it up here, lads. I'm just trying to round it up so we can go on to our next question. In all seriousness, so let's actually do that. DFM, we're not keen on them, but. Who knows? Playoffs are a weird and crazy place, and they do have that history, which I think is...
Yeah, and DFM have done it before.
Is fair. No, and it's fair to also bring up the history. But with that all said, we could probably talk about that for a full topic, but I don't want us to, because it's been a long podcast already. We have Sake here that asks us the question, which I actually think is far more spicy for us. Which LJL team should go to Worlds? Not would we like, should go to Worlds. We're seeing Sam on the camera. If you can't see that, reverse it and you'll get it right.
Oh, there we go. Fine on my screen, but that's like I pronounced this mirrored on that one. There you go. Anyway, V3, easy answer.
V3 for Initia1ise, Nymaera. Do you want me to go first? I'll go
He's
first.
gonna say CGA.
I'm gonna say.
Watch him.
I'm saying. I'm also
thinking
agreeing
about
with you. Initialize. It's V3 sports for me.
Gonna say CGA. Watch him do it.
No, I'll say DFM.
He could hear the choir singing. The church is calling to him.
No, he's gonna say DFM, and it's gonna be this whole reason. I'll be like, of course. It's me from week one, first episode of the podcast.
So no, it's not DFM. I'm genuinely considering CGA.
There we go.
I think. Oh,
But they get solved so hard at Worlds.
No, I don't think that it will be CGA because I think that. Okay, put it this way.
No. This is should. Should remember.
Should. No, should. No, this is what I'm saying. Like, should is in like who will win the split. Oh, yeah.
No. Who should represent and go to Worlds? Which LDM should go to Worlds? Not if they're going to win playoffs or anything else. Doesn't matter. Who should go to Worlds because they have the best performance?
Question.
That's why me and Sam went straight
I think
for
of
V3.
the best performing emerging region teams ever, and they've always been the ones with the highest upper ceiling. So I think it should be CGA. I think it should be. I think that mechanically they have the ability to... Yeah, I think that V3 have some really good stuff to play around, but CGA, if they pop off with all of their members, have a higher ceiling than any other LJL team.
But I think that's super solved.
I'm not even sure that's true. Like,
I think they are, but I think even when they're solved, they can still win.
But
And
we
I think
saw
that's
them
something
lose to fucking Axis, bro.
Axis?
Come on.
Yeah, I know,
Like-
but we've also seen them beat V3 and TFM
They
and
were
Sengoku.
super lucky to beat the Jest as well. They were basically relying on Ornn and
Sam,
Ornn
if
and the
you're
Bard
Sam,
to
if you
buy
can
off.
reduce every game down to a coin flip and potentially beat someone like Top or IG, that
Don't
make it
you
into
pull a
that.
KT Bullets argument on
Yes,
me.
I genuinely
Don't
think.
you pull a KT Bullets
I
argument on
genuinely
me.
think
I
that
don't
there are
think
teams.
they- no.
There are teams that will do what V3 do at the international stage better than them. CGA potentially will do what they do better than anyone else at a playing
Yeah.
stage.
I
genuinely
see that
think
argument.
CGA.
I do.
That's like I look at like
I
Albus
just
Nox
don't
Luna,
see Unica and Grendel performing well at Worlds.
But
I just
Grendel is
can't
actually
see
playing
that.
really well this split. Unica's starting to do something which isn't the bare
But
minimum.
no, he's not. And I will defend my point against Grendel, because I did this on cast, and I did this 3 times out of the 4 games I
Grendel's set
casted.
versus C3 was really, really
Yeah,
good.
he has a great set. Sure, he also will still int at least 1 kill guaranteed, and I almost called
no,
it. And I did that every time with Initialize. I went, return to form, Grendel, very good. We expect this every time.
But everybody does that on
One of the most famous
CGA.
supports
apart
in
from-
history is Hachani, who won fucking Season 4 Summer
Was he
LCK,
ever
which
in
is the
contention
highest
for
level
the best
competition.
support ever? Really?
Sam, that is the highest level competition League of Legends
But I'm not.
ever
But
seen.
you're not. No. But you're
Ever
not giving
seen.
that to Grendel. You didn't make him your overall Super Week MVP. We don't rarely give Grendel a fucking overall MVP for the support role. I can't. I refuse to agree with you. I will not. I'm not going to talk about like Unica, because that's a whole different kettle of fish at the moment. But I am defending the point that he is a kind of mid-tier support player and will not
Grendel's
support
had a
him.
really good split.
He is like Grendel is fine when he's on the front foot. How easy do you think it'll be for him to be on the front foot internationally? That said, I can absolutely see the argument for
They could
CGA.
flip their way to like group stage.
No.
Yeah. So like I kind of see the I
highest
do see the
variance of
argument.
any. They have the highest variance.
That's
of
the
any
thing. It's
LJL team.
variance, not skills. I think
Yeah,
sometimes.
they
what it
could
is.
lose to like some random CBLOL team and beat like the Korean, Chinese, third, fourth seeds.
So,
They could do that.
yeah.
They genuinely could.
Well, what I'll say is I kind of see the argument actually. If you can go and basically say, okay, we can pull out some weird drafts and have raw mechanics in the form of Arya and Gango just being really, really good with Nap on something like Ornn to back them up and initiate, then I see the world where CGA is a better team than V3, because it could just be that V3 are really good at something, but all the other teams do what they do just slightly better. And that could end up being a real flaw. Whereas CGA could just like drag everybody down to their level and beat them with experience.
Yes,
Like,
that's
that's
exactly
always a
it.
possibility.
I'm like,
I get
my
that
problem
argument.
is-
But you can
My
also
problem
do-
is-
we
so-
also. Oh, sorry, go for it. Go for it.
Put it this way: play-ins. A lot of this does come from the way that play-ins will be played this year. There are more teams in play-ins, and, that
And
includes,
also
like, more teams
assuming
from
it
major regions.
happens.
Assuming it happens, but if you look at play-ins this year, right, you've got an extra 2 teams from Korea, an extra team from Europe and from China, which means that the amount of available spots to get out of play-ins and get to groups is really low for like
Well,
wildcard
it's actually
teams.
emerging regions, yeah.
Yeah. So then I'm like, okay, so you have to have the point, like, if you cannot drop random games, but you it used to be the fact that you couldn't drop random games to make it into groups. Now it is you have to take a random upset to even have a chance. you have to get through as like first seed, or you're gonna play someone like fucking Damwon, or someone like FPX, or even like Rogue or Origin, some shit like that. And I'm like,
Invictus Gaming, you're your third seed. Enjoy laning against Rookie and the Shy.
So then I'm like, who is the team that could actually take that random upset? It is CJ over V3 for me, because they just randomly pull people down to their level and beat them.
I'm sorry, like, I can't not put the team where we've literally said the top 2 players in their respective roles, being Boogie and Reiner. I also like, in all fairness,
who do I think will do? Who do I think would have the best chance of making groups? Genuinely, CJ would play on play-ins format this year.
I also just think V3 have a far better spot at representing the region in a fairer sense, because they also have just beaten everybody, and the only team they've gone 1-on-1 against is CGA. Sure, CGA brought them down to their level, but they also got clapped. So...
yeah. And plus,
CGA have won against everyone too. They've just got a lot of 1-on-1s.
Yeah,
I'll say that V3
because they could do that in group. They could do that trying to get out of to get to groups, and they could just go 1-on-1 a bunch and what.
Also, you know, like we know Boogie's. I also will say this. I think V3 have got better early game plans than most teams in the world.
Oh, CGA's early game's kind of shit. Yeah.
So like, and actually, there is a world where actually, like, I still think V3 will be better in play-ins than CGA, just because I think their early game's better. Yeah, that's they're 5 to 10 minutes, and actually, it's like there is a world where you snowball super hard through Reiner and Boogie, diving bot, pull out the Galio, and just slap people that way.
But like, if you play against someone like... So what happens if Garm comes in from VCS, and you're playing against Ace versus Dia1?
Dia1, and he pulls out Tristana into Galio.
Or Tristana's getting buffed for 10-16, by the way. A huge buff. I just read it now.
Tristana into Galio would be really
so I'm just like, okay.
It's on the live it's on the beta server at the moment. Whether it makes it to the live patch is another.
Well, this is what they're planning to do. Most of the time when they iterate on it a little bit, but basically what they're doing is Tristana's E, which has already got like 175 base AD scaling or some shit like basic bonus AD.
Well,
now it does an extra 1% damage for every 2% crit. So if you get 50% crit, there's an extra 25% damage on your bomb, which is already hilariously overpowered. So yeah, Trista's gonna be huge. But I'm like, we already seen Ace struggle against Arya in the match where they lost, because like he doesn't have that crutch lane all the time.
Well, that was the Jace, and that's a whole nother thing.
No, but that's the best champion he has in lane versus Arya left. You ban out Karma and Galio, and you can't lane with anything else.
Okay, I disagree this because they think they played the draft horribly.
No, but he doesn't have a champion that can survive against Arya, and he still died against Arya.
They didn't pick the Galio. They didn't whatever.
Yeah.
We can argue about that till the cows come home.
Yeah, I think that Ace is going to be really hard targeted in international.
Ace could be really
he can.
He's going to be hugely exposed.
But then I also think there are bigger explosion problems on CGA's bot lane, personally.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I just think that the variance of CGA allows them to take games that V3 don't have a hope of taking. So I'm like, who do I think will win? Yeah, it's going to be V3, because I think that CGA, if they have to go through 2 best-of-5s versus V3, even if they win the first one, they're just going to get slapped in the second. But I think that in play-ins, like, CGA have the best chance of actually making something stupidly special happen, because they're a stupidly special team.
Yeah, they could be the first LJL team to make it all the way to the group stage, because we've never
genuinely
seen that. And that would be a very big thing for us. And I think both these teams have a far better chance than our historic team that has normally gone to Worlds and sadly gotten clapped a fair few times. No offense, Initia1ise, no offense, but they've been clapped a fair few of history.
They have. You know, like unless you go back to like 2017 when they were playing like Rift Rivals and stuff and played pretty well there. That's when you can do it. And they beat up a lot of equivalent.
I mean, what's interesting is none of us said DFM, even though we predicted them to win all this split. But granted, obviously, we've now got to see all of this. Also, none of us thought Sengoku after Super Week. But I wonder if this question was asked before Super Week, Sengoku might have been on the cards. Might. I'm not saying is. I'm just saying might. Interesting.
I mean, certainly higher probability of it. I think that again if I was going to say CJ have the highest variance,
I'd rather bet Burning Core going than Sengoku now.
This is the thing, right? You know what I was talking about CJ having the highest variance?
Sure.
Sengoku have the lowest variance, and therefore it's complete antithesis of my argument. I'm just like, look, they've got really good fundamentals, but that's not enough to carry you against like LPL. Korean.
Yeah, and we've also said that they are super reliant on Pyrion kind of being a rock in mid lane. This is the guy that went 0-9-2 on Orianna in the LCK and never saw play there again.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that, lads, or you will never get to play in the region again until maybe Korea comes calling for the reverse exodus that we might be seeing. And this might make our whole region, we are at our best point ever, and then...
Oh dear.
We will have to wait and see after Worlds does occur. Gentlemen, our last question is a bit of a mean question from one of our guest casters, who asks what it feels like to be how does it feel being a less cool than VCS English? I actually did that verbatim.
How does it feel being less cool than VCS English?
Yeah. I mean, look. Okay, so the reason we're less cool is we are just too damn hot to handle. Why? And therefore it feels just significantly better.
How does it feel being less cool than Nymaera, Initia1ise, and MaskedSwan every day?
Yeah.
How does it feel?
Too hot to handle over here.
I mean, they also listen to an hour 40 minutes
Have you
of
looked
our
at us?
podcast like that. Let's be real. Who really wins this battle if he's listened all this place to get to just his question? I think we
Thanks
won.
for the dollar, buddy.
I think we're winning. I think we're winning. And with that said, though, gentlemen, that is going to be the end of our podcast. We've had highs. We've had lows. We've talked about Super Week to death now, and thankfully we will never have to really come up back to this except for brief moments where like, oh yeah, they did lose during Super Week. Oh yeah, that was the thing. We talked about the matchups the teams had. We talked about their records. We then gave both of our players of the week for Week 6, Week 7, and then our overall MVP. We then argued about will DFM win a playoff series, and then who do we also think should represent the LJL at Worlds, and then we flamed every day at the very end. Gentlemen, as I like to always do, I'm going to hand it over to first Nymaera and then Initia1ise to give any of their closing thoughts. And
I got to say so many spicy things today. It's great. I even only got half flame for the CGA thing just a minute ago. So yeah, I'm happy with this episode. Hooray. Say some cool stuff.
Initia1ise?
Basking here, being too hot to handle compared to the VCS.
And that's it. We're too hot to handle. Thank you, though, for making it through this podcast episode. We will be back with episode 26 next week to recap everything that happened at the end of Week 7, talking about the teams that are, and we'll actually know their place in coming in, unless there's tiebreakers. Then we'll discuss tiebreaker matches as well in that podcast, recapping also our whole of the summer split as a whole, and our thoughts about our teams coming in and out. We will have a break in between, so we will also do a recap episode going through. But for that said, for Nymaera, Initia1ise, and myself, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all very, very soon.